Chapter 1101. But the next moment, Irma came to her senses. No, his World Faction Performing Arts was also the greatest performing arts monograph in human history. He had forcibly elevated the performing arts to a whole new level. Irma Watson squeezed her satchel, which contained the second volume of World Faction. She had bought a big gift pack of the hardback book, which cost $29.9 along with the movie tickets. It was now out of print. She had finished reading the first volume and was now eagerly reading the second volume. The theory in the book was a little difficult for her to understand. This was because her attitude was different from that of ordinary people. Ordinary people could treat such a book as a novel or a reading book, but she was different. She was a professional actress. After discovering the meaning of the book, she treated it with the attitude she had when she was in university. She required herself to have a deep understanding of every paragraph in the book, which made her study slower than ordinary people. She even felt that she might have to read it 5 or 6 times. Apart from the second volume of World Faction, she also had a notebook wrapped in calf leather in her bag. It was filled with her notes. She felt that she might have to fill another 5 or 6 notebooks. Although she had not finished reading World Faction, as a professional actress, Irma's intuition told her that the Chinese Qin Guang's achievements in the performing arts should also be world-class, not inferior to his achievements in the piano. Irma walked out of the cafe unknowingly. Looking at the people outside, her mind fell into endless confusion. Was there really such a great person in this world? Was that Chinese man sent by God to rule the arts? If one day he suddenly said that he wanted to paint, and his paintings were comparable to Da Vinci's or Van Gogh's, wouldn't it be too surprising? I almost forgot that he did know how to sculpt, but it was just a subcategory of sculpture called microsculpture. At that moment, Qin Guang did not know that he had successfully made Irma Watson a fan. He was sitting in his hotel room feeling extremely pained. His face looked as if he had eaten 3 pounds of flies. He really did not know how much the Oscar judges in Eton Manor feared him if he did not personally ask around. That Malfoy Bentler even stood up for the keynote concert with Brosnan. You can do it. You really can. Buddy, I'm going to double-click 666 100 times. Boss, what's the situation? Fang Tianyu opened the door and poked his head in. Let's not talk about it. How about going downstairs for dinner? Qin Guang turned his head and looked at Fang's head. I say, Xiao Fang, if I directly state the price and spread the word that I'll get $100,000 for every hour I talk to you, will those big shots come? Fang Tianyu shook his head like a rattledrum. No. Absolutely not. Qin Guang asked, why? Fang Tianyu pinched his fingers and calculated. In North America, a foreign supermodel would usually accompany a foreign woman to eat and play. This price is going to make people think the wrong way. F***ck. Your way of thinking is too that. But didn't Donald Jostein run naked just now? Isn't it normal for others to think that you're interested in old chrysanthemums? Qin Guang silently looked at Fang Tianyu's face, not saying a word for a long time. Fang Tianyu turned and ran away. Boss, I'll get someone to send you dinner later. Qin Guang shouted from behind, come back here. There's something else. After waiting for a few minutes, Fang Tianyu mustered up the courage to open the door again. Qin Guang sighed. There's no other way. Prepare a night suit for me. F***ck boss, are you serious? You'll get a heavy sentence. Qin Guang looked at Fang Tianyu as if he wanted to eat him alive. What the F***ck are you thinking about? What do you know? I'm going to make a dirty deal with them. Fang Tianyu trembled violently. Oh my God. Qin Guang realized that he had said the wrong thing. Don't F***king think about it. I'm not talking about that kind of dirty deal. No, it's okay boss. I won't laugh at you. Are you tired of living? I just want to talk to them. Okay. Boss, I'll go do something first. In the end, Fang Tianyu turned and ran away. Qin Guang felt that after he was done with this matter and returned to China, he must find a suitable reason to improve the fighting skills of his 4 great warriors, especially Fang Tianyu and Lu Xiaoyang, who were in cahoots with each other. This is for your own good. If you follow me, you'll definitely be hated by others. If you train your skills better, you won't be beaten up by others on the streets. This is for your own good. Just as he was complaining, Fang Tianyu came back. Qin Guang laughed sinisterly. Yo, come, Fang Tianyu. I suddenly feel that it's easy to make enemies when you follow me. Stick your head in here. I'll give you a buff and teach you some self-defense skills. Fang Tianyu would not fall for this trick. Boss, I don't want 8 blessings. There's a beauty outside who wants to see you. Qin Guang's expression brightened. Who is it? Are their breasts big? Is their figure good? Is it expensive? Fang Qianyu. 5 minutes later, Qin Guang met an unexpected person in the living room of the suite. It was Irma Watson. He did not expect this girl to follow him here and was very surprised. After all, in his eyes, although his disguise was clumsy, his world-class acting skills at that time were flawless. Irma Watson could not have broken free from the boundaries of his acting skills. How did she see through him? Qin Guang sized up Irma and Irma sized up Qin Guang. Mr. Qin, I didn't see through you. I only found you because of my intuition as an actor. Your performance in Brosnan's cafe was impeccable. It was not until I saw your fingers that I was sure that Blake and Wright were the same person. Darkness and light. Mr. Qin, you really know how to name yourself. To his surprise, Irma spoke first and dispelled Qin Guang's doubts. Qin Guang shrugged. Fine. A woman's intuition is really the most powerful mirror in the world. Mirror? What's that? You can think of it as Harry Potter's anti-magic spell. Irma smiled. I'm not Irma Watson. Qin Guang nodded. I know. What can I do for you? You're not mocking me on behalf of William Jones, are you? I remember you are his friend. Irma shook her head and combed her long brown hair. I don't know Mr. Jones very well. Attending his premiere was just a task that my grandfather gave me. Who's your grandfather? James Watson. Qin Guang raised his eyebrows. Sounds like a big shot. Irma nodded. He used to be, but not anymore. My grandfather is the former chairman of the Oscar committee. Qin Guang's interest was piqued. He did not expect Irma to be so direct. So what's your purpose in looking for me? Irma suddenly became excited. Mr. Qin, before I met you in the coffee shop, I was reading your World Pie. I don't care what other people think of you, but I feel that if you really wrote this book, your achievements in the performing arts are unprecedented. Although Qin Guang was often fawned on by others, he felt a little embarrassed when he was fawned on by an international friend. Furthermore, it was a long-haired lady who wasn't particularly stunning. Furthermore, she was the granddaughter of the previous chairman of the Academy Awards. Ms. Watson, you have good taste. Irma covered her mouth and laughed. Mr. Qin, you are as straightforward as people say. I used to think that you were rude, but now I understand that your confidence stems from your achievements. It's not rude. Qin Guang nodded. That's right. Those who look down on me are blind. Irma Watson nodded. That's right. My grandfather is also senile. I especially admire people who put righteousness before family. You can't lose justice just because of friendship. Irma nodded again. That's right. Also, I heard your performance in the coffee shop today. Do you know what they said about you after you left? Qin Guang chuckled. Irma, you're too polite. Just call me Wright. What did they say about me? They said that Mr. Qin is the greatest pianist in the last 100 years. You flatter me. I don't deserve it. Qin Guang was not being modest at all. He was just a human jukebox. Asking him to compose was asking for his life. The greatest pianist lived up to his name, but being an artist was a waste. Right, you know how to be modest. But I feel that ever since you came to America, you've been treated unfairly. I think this can't go on. It will become a stain on the history of art. Finally, Irma spoke the words that Qin Guang wanted to hear the most. Qin Guang let out a long sigh. Why didn't I know you earlier? There are so few reasonable Americans like you, Irma. I came to Princeton for this purpose, but they didn't want to see me. I'm so upset that I can't sleep. Irma suddenly felt uneasy. My grandpa's worries are not unreasonable. After all, Mr. Joshtan, don't say any more. This is the idiot Donald's own decision. If he had told me earlier that he planned to fulfill his promise, I would have been the first to jump out and stop him. Qin Guang then told him about the bet between Donald Joshtan and Tang Xiao. After Irma heard that, he could not help but laugh hysterically after holding it in for a long time. He only managed to catch his breath after a while and said, in other words, this is Mr. Joshtan's own decision? Nonsense. His body is so bad. Who wants to see him naked? Then you're really screwed by Mr. Joshtan. Of course. This is the biggest setback I've ever experienced since I started my career. Irma suddenly stood up and clenched her fists. So, right, I want to help you. If Qin Guang was not afraid that he would accidentally attract girls abroad, he would have hugged her by the waist. This was the only real human warmth that he had encountered since he started his career in the North American film industry. Wait a minute, I'll call my grandpa and ask him to come here. Qin Guang was puzzled. Mr. Watson is also in Princeton? Yes, grandpa is in the castle. Qin Guang looked down at the celebrity encyclopedia on his phone. He likes to wear Mickey Mouse underwear. Oh, yes, right, how did you know? Qin Guang silently covered his face. I really don't want to know. That's the nightmare of my life. After waiting for about an hour, Qin Guang and Irma had dinner together. James Watson finally arrived, but he refused to meet in the hotel room. He insisted on meeting in the park opposite the hotel. Helpless, Qin Guang and Irma went downstairs side by side. They sat on a bench in the park for a full 20 minutes before the old man sneaked out. In fact, Qin Guang already knew that he was hiding behind a bush not far away, secretly looking at him. However, he could not drag him out. Irma, come over here. Stay away from him. Old James stood 5 meters away like a retired agent, waving at Irma from afar. At the same time, he looked at Qin Guang with a guarded expression. The two had to spend a full 10 minutes to dispel old James' suspicions. He burst out laughing like Irma. At the same time, Qin Guang felt that the laughter of the two of them had been passed down from generation to generation. It was as if they were sawing wood. Mr. Watson, I really don't have any bad intentions. I really want to do something for the film industry. You can think that I'm shameless, but I feel that I've already shown enough sincerity and respect for the Oscars by writing World's Pie and making women. This award is very important to me. It's a matter of life and death. I can't wait a year. Qin Guang and old James struggled to explain. But old James had obviously not seen World's Pie or women. Although he had his granddaughter as a middleman, he still looked doubtful. Irma, who was next to him, was furious. My dear grandpa, what did you teach me in the past? If you want to question something, you have to understand it first. You also told me not to discriminate against others just because their skin color is darker than ours. Obama and Bush are both our presidents. But why did you suspect Mr. Qin just because of his skin color? Old James blushed at Irma's words. He waved his hands and said, Okay. It's 8 o'clock in the evening. There will be a screening of Women in half an hour. Why don't we go and watch it now? Irma was overjoyed. Grandpa, you seem to know a lot about the screening schedule for Women. Old James sighed. How could I not? The box office of this movie today has almost broken $50 million. The movies made by our peers are almost suffocating from the pressure. Qin Guang was shocked. It's even higher than yesterday? That's impossible. Old James looked back at him. Even you don't think it's possible, let alone us. Forget it. Let's go and see. 2 hours and 40 minutes later, Qin Guang and Irma walked out of the cinema with old James on each side. Poor old James. As a veteran director, his understanding of movies was far beyond that of ordinary people. That was why he fell deeper than those medical experts and piano masters. The three of them walked all the way to the brightly lit park before old James suddenly let out a shout. God. My dear God. Jesus, why didn't I see this great movie 50 years earlier? Let me see Rai Chen's great performance earlier. Oh my God. I just want to kneel down to the great Rai Chen. What kind of stupid mistake did I make? Qin Guang really blushed this time. Cultured people are really different. They're really good at flattering people. I'm about to fly into the sky. It really wasn't easy for me. I finally found a breakthrough. Chapter 11:02. Mr. Watson, then, shall we go to Eaton Manor now? After waiting for another 10 minutes or so, old James finally calmed down, and Qin Guang said excitedly. He couldn't wait to convince all the members of the Motion Picture Association. Whether it was the box office or the reputation, Women had reached the standard for the Oscars. However, Hollywood's seemingly fair selection was more complicated than expected. Otherwise, every film that tried to compete for the Oscars, especially the Best Picture, Best Actor and Best Actress, wouldn't have to spend tens of millions of dollars on public relations. In addition to the quality and standard of the film itself, there were often many side effects that would affect the final result. After all, in the past many years, there had been more than one film that reached the standard of the Oscars in a year. The evaluation of film art awards had never been completely fair, and it was almost impossible for a film to be overwhelmingly strong. After all, film art was always a matter of different opinions. This time, although Qin Guang's Women had an overwhelming advantage over the other competitors, including Sunshine and July, as well as the films of the same period released last year, and its box office was also phenomenal, there were several blockbusters that had similar box office performance as Women this year. However, the box office had never been an important criterion for the Oscars. It was far from enough to win an Oscar based on the box office alone. Qin Guang couldn't hope to cater to all the judges, but he had to at least rope in a few heavyweights among the judges. At least he had to get through the preliminary selection and get on the list of nominees. If he couldn't even get on the list, he wouldn't be able to win an award. I'm sorry, Mr. Qin, I may not be able to agree to your request. We can't go to Eaton Manor now. Unexpectedly, after a short consideration, old James rejected Qin Guang's proposal. Qin Guang's expression changed slightly. He didn't quite understand, so he turned to look at Elma Watson next to him. Elma understood Qin Guang's meaning and asked, "Grandpa, why?" James Watson gestured for the two of them to sit on the park benches. "Mr. Qin, it's not that I don't want to help you. I also think that you're worth it. However, it has been almost 5 years since I left my post as the president of the American Film Association and the chairman of the Academy Awards Committee. Although the people in the association still respect me and respect my attitude because of my qualifications and reputation, I am no longer in office. I am just an ordinary judge." Hearing those words, Qin Guang instantly figured it out and asked, "Mr. Watson, you mean the current president?" Old James nodded but then shook his head. "I don't have any conflicts with Fred and he respects me very much. But at the same time, I have to maintain sufficient recognition of his authority. After all, I've already stepped down. Mr. Qin, do you understand what I mean?" Qin Guang nodded. "I know. How could I not know? What's all this scheming? I recommend you to watch a Chinese television series called The Name of the People. Your thick black theory is child's play. Completely child's play." Beside him, Elma interrupted, "Recently, other than your movie, this Chinese television series has also exploded on social media, but it doesn't have English subtitles. I heard that it's the Chinese version of House of Cards?" "Let's not talk about House of Cards anymore. Mr. Watson, can you tell me what we should do now? I've prepared a very sufficient budget, absolutely sufficient. As long as the judges are willing, my budget can let everyone travel around the world for more than 3.5 weeks. It was not easy to talk about feelings, so Qin Guang went straight to the point and talked about money. A problem that could be solved with money was not a problem. Right now, he just wanted to solve all problems in a more convenient way. Old James smiled. "Mr. Qin, we all know your budget, but that's not important. Although everyone loves American dollars, the senior members of the American Film Association are not poor. It's not that we need American dollars. Don't worry, there are still more than 20 days before the primaries. When I go back, I'll learn from Elma and privately contact a few senior members who are close to me. I'll convince them one by one, and when the time is right, I'll invite you to meet everyone." Qin Guang understood what old James meant. He still had to use the method of boiling a frog in warm water to slowly penetrate it. He was quite annoyed about this. It was not his style to not cut the Gordian knot when doing things. However, there was no other way. He wanted to succeed in one go, but it seemed that Donald's nude running had left too much of a psychological scar on the others. Old James comforted him instead. "Mr. Qin, don't worry too much. Just like what you said, you want the Oscars to be the Oscars for the filmmakers. I don't deny that too many political factors have been mixed into the Oscars over the years, and there's no guarantee that the Oscars will change in the future. But at least this year your women, and world's faction, have shown achievements that transcend time. We have to respect that. As long as you can get into the nomination list, no matter how resistant my old friends are, they'll still have to watch your movie in the end. They won't be any better than I am then. If I can't convince more people, I'll be able to get the movie through the primaries by myself. I promise you. But if I bring you back today, they'll think that you did something to me." Old James did not finish his sentence, but Qin Guang remembered the old man's Mickey Mouse underwear. Qin Guang nodded. "Okay, that's all we can do for now. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Watson. After it's done." Old James shook his head. "Don't give me money. If your movie is only at the level of The Sunshine Man, you'll have to spend money to get nominated. But you're different. You're Qin Guang and your movie is women. From the standpoint of a filmmaker, we should be the ones giving you money to thank you for your great contribution to the film industry." In the end, Qin Guang was flattered by the old man to the point that he looked like a celestial being. Just as he was about to chat for a while, Qin Guang suddenly received a call from Zhuo Jingxi. Zhuo Jingxi said that several research institutions had finally found out where they lived in Princeton. The heads of several institutions had come together overnight. Helplessly getting up, Qin Guang looked at Irma and opened his mouth. He was about to open his mouth when old James suddenly pulled his granddaughter away. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Qin. It's too late tonight. See you another day." Before he finished speaking, old James had already dragged Irma away. He did not look like an old man at all. He was clearly a 100-meter sprint champion. Qin Guang was stunned. He was furious. This old man was looking down on him. "What kind of person do you think I am? Do you think I'm the kind of young master who goes around flirting? The old man has so many beauties that he can't even take care of himself. Why would he be interested in your Irma?" Qin Guang, who was wearing a big tent, got up and walked away with a straight face. When Qin Guang returned to the hotel, it was already 11 o'clock at night. Princeton was not a city with a rich nightlife. The street outside the hotel was already empty, but the entrance of the hotel was bustling with people. Finally, when Qin Guang appeared, the project leaders of major scientific research institutions almost burst into tears. Ever since they saw the molecular formula in the magazine the night before yesterday, they had not had a good night's sleep. Bravo and Wertzman knew what was good, and so did the heads of other major scientific research institutions and top experts. Everyone could understand the huge market behind this set of molecular formulas. That was why they had rushed here like crazy yesterday and tried to get in touch with the developer of the molecular formula, which was Zhuo Jingxi herself. Although Zhuo Jingxi was easy to deal with, she insisted that she did not own the intellectual property rights. In the end, the person who made the final decision was Qin Guang. The purchase of the equipment was easy to negotiate, but Zhuo Jingxi even tried to poach him on the spot. When it came to the molecular formula and the undisclosed molecular formula, as well as more intellectual property cooperation, Zhuo Jingxi began to push the matter to the back and forth. This made everyone very awkward and helpless. Many of the relevant heads of scientific research institutions did not expect that the Qin Guang that Zhuo Jingxi was talking about was Qin Guang, who had recently turned the American film industry upside down with women. After being rejected for a whole day, the heads of major scientific research institutions had no choice but to use the name Qin Guang. It was not difficult to find out who Qin Guang was. After all, he had appeared in the Princeton District Court and was on the news. Although the directors of the major research institutions almost thought that they were blind when they discovered that the two were actually the same person, they were all experienced people after all. They quickly calmed down and accepted the rather bizarre fact. It was not difficult to find out where Qin Guang and Zhuo Jingxi were staying. Soon, the major institutions confirmed where Qin Guang was staying. This was a market worth hundreds of billions of dollars. In this kind of business, things that could be done today should not be delayed until tomorrow. God knows who would be shameless enough to knock on the door at the speed of light. Hence, everyone rushed to the hotel that Qin Guang was staying in. But when they arrived, they awkwardly discovered that everyone else was thinking the same thing as well. The heads of the University of California, Cambridge, Oxford, Waseda, Rockefeller Laboratory, Lincoln Laboratory, Cavendish Laboratory, Sanshin Corporation, and other institutions as well as the representatives of the American branch, were not willing to give in. The many scientific research institutions that originally only planned to cooperate privately had to face this very awkward situation. There was obviously no way to communicate privately, and it was likely that they would have to face a situation of public bidding. Chapter 1103. This was a rare experience for many of the major companies that had monopolized the world's technology. In the past, it was always others who rushed to their doorstep to seek cooperation with them. They were the ones who sat on the fishing platform and waited for others to give them benefits. It was always others who begged them to cooperate. Sometimes they might take the initiative to extend an olive branch to others, but there had never been a situation where they would rush to someone else's doorstep after reading the news the day before, only to bump into someone else in the same industry. Everyone was like a shark that smelled blood. They were prepared to take advantage of the disparity in resources and information to snatch this piece of fat meat from the jaws of Prince's laboratory. However, when they arrived at the scene, they were not sharks at all. Everyone was clearly a group of pugs fighting for food. The people from Sanxing suggested that everyone leave today and hold a meeting overnight. This way, the giants could reach a certain degree of consensus in private so that they wouldn't be at a complete disadvantage in the negotiations with Qin Guang. After all, practically all the major companies in the field of photocatalysis had gathered here. Since everyone had reached a consensus, they could naturally force Qin Guang's side to submit. They could grab Qin Guang's neck from the flow of industry talents, equipment and raw materials procurement channels. This sounded wonderful. If the thing they were fighting for wasn't so hot, they might have reached an agreement. Unfortunately, no one was a fool. Everyone knew how the Koreans did things. They would hold a meeting here, and then they would secretly send someone to negotiate with the other party. They were despicable and sinister. By the time they came back to their senses, the other party would have signed an exclusive agreement with the other party at a lower price. This wasn't some random cabbage on the street. It was the result of photocatalysis. It was like the crouching dragon and phoenix of the Three Kingdoms period. Who dared to relax? Who dared to bet on whether the Koreans were moral or not? Also, not only did they have to be wary of the Koreans, they had to be wary of everyone. Most importantly, Qin Guang had heavy technology in his hands that could explode the entire industry. He was the leader. As long as he nodded, he could instantly create a giant hole in the so-called monopoly barrier formed by the major companies. When the technology level was completely crushed, the so-called industry barrier was a joke. F***ck off. Shameless Koreans. Go away. Stupid Koreans. In the end, the impromptu negotiation at the entrance of the hotel ended on bad terms. Everyone was suspicious of each other. Some of them even wanted to send someone out alone to search, but the others in the same trade would desperately stop them. However, on one matter they reached a very mysterious consensus. 5 of the reputable institutions in the industry would jointly send people to stop Princeton's local snake, which was also the most authoritative laboratory in the field of photocatalysts. As soon as Chen Guang's figure appeared at the entrance of the hotel, he was immediately surrounded by people. Chen Guang peeked into the crowd and was slightly disappointed when he didn't see Prince's men. He had originally planned to use this late, almost public bidding meeting to put some pressure on Prince, but in the end no one came, so there was nothing he could do. Prince, you're not doing your best. This is your territory after all. Look at the attitude of others and then look at your own performance. It's too disappointing. Do I really have to consider changing to another research institute? If it wasn't for the fact that Prince was indeed leading in the field of photocatalysis, Chen Guang really wanted to replace him. The current situation made him a little embarrassed. Forget it, I'll just try to talk to them first. I originally wanted to put pressure on Prince anyway. They can't be indifferent to the God-level formula. Mr. Chin? I'm from the Alamo Laboratory at the University of California. Mr. Chin, let's talk. I'm from the Lincoln Laboratory at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Mr. Chin? Chen Guang was surrounded so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. These people were either experts in the academic world or the heads of various organizations and companies. They weren't as arrogant as they usually were, and they were as passionate as students asking their teacher questions. In Chen Guang's opinion, it wouldn't be a problem for him to receive more people, but his nose couldn't take it. This group of men is so unreasonable. You guys are obviously here to talk business. Can't you guys take a good bath first? Are you guys trying to kill me? Otherwise, can you guys send some good-looking girls to caress the old man? Although the old man was known in the pugilistic world as Lu Xiaohui, as long as the girls were beautiful enough, it was not impossible to talk to them. It was no wonder that Chen Guang in the crowd felt like he had fallen into the devil's den. However, he couldn't blame others for not showering. International people were born with a stronger body odor. Moreover, most of the people around Chen Guang were fat people with big bellies. Of course, the smell was very sour, like pickled cabbage in an old jar. Everyone make way. All of you make way for me. Can't you let me pass? Chen Guang wanted to escape from the crowd, but he couldn't reject the hospitality of these fellows. Although they were plump, their faces were pale, and he was afraid that he might accidentally injure them. In the end, he had no choice but to roar out. After finally escaping from the crowd, Chen Guang said immediately, "Don't push. Everyone don't push. I'll arrange the meeting room now. If you have anything to say, we can talk in the meeting room." After saying that, Chen Guang didn't care whether others listened or not. He rushed straight to the front desk of the hotel and asked the hotel staff to prepare. Then, Chen Guang handed over the task of entertaining people to the hotel staff with a $2,000 tip. He asked everyone to wait in the meeting room while he went upstairs to look for Zhuo Jingxi. Zhuo Jingxi had been waiting for him to come back. She was still awake. When Chen Guang knocked on the door, she had just finished organizing her documents. Opening the door, Zhuo Jingxi asked with a smile, "You're back? How's the discussion about the movie going?" Chen Guang was in a good mood. "It's good. There's progress. What are you busy with? If you want to sleep, you can sleep first. I'll go talk to them." Zhuo Jingxi shook her head. "I can't do that. You were the one who threw this to me, but I'm lazy and thin-skinned. I don't know how to refuse others, and I'm afraid of taking responsibility. That's why I pushed it to you. But I'll still attend this meeting." Chen Guang pinched Zhuo Jingxi's butt. "I say, why else would they wait for me in the middle of the night? Let's go. We can talk about this and rest early." "Wait a minute, this is the information I just finished organizing. Take a look first." Chen Guang took the things that Zhuo Jingxi handed over and spent 7 or 8 minutes quickly browsing through them. Zhuo Jingxi was very meticulous. In this document, she wrote very clearly about the current situation of the institutions that came to Princeton to participate in the competition in the field of photocatalysis. From the past results of the major scientific research institutions to their current facilities, equipment, and staffing, everything was there. It also included their next investment plans in the field of photocatalysis. "That's amazing," Chen Guang praised. Zhuo Jingxi smiled embarrassedly. They took the initiative to provide it to me. I just organized it so that you could look it up. Unfortunately, it seems that Prince is still the strongest. The other institutions have some hardware and software gaps. It's okay. They're all pretenses. Why didn't anyone from China come? Teacher Xu called. Gokyo University and the Chinese Academy of Sciences both wanted to participate, but their conditions were too different. I didn't dare to agree immediately, but I didn't reject them either. It's okay. We'll go back and talk to them. Let's go. Qin Guang took the documents and went out first. It was almost 11:30 p.m. After a few steps, he remembered something. Didn't I say we don't want Wasida's people? Why are they here too? Zhuo Jingxi shrugged. Others don't know, but Wasida is second only to Prince. Are we really going to reject them directly? If we don't end up negotiating with Prince, we should be able to contact Wasida within 3 months. Qin Guang waved his hand. No, definitely not. I'd rather not talk to Wasida than Tongshan. Also, I won't talk to the Koreans. At this time, the people from Wasida and Sanxing were waiting excitedly in the conference room. They had no idea that they had sentenced Qin Guang to death in advance. The people from Wasida were the most miserable. At this moment, they were the most excited. Whether it was the cooperation conditions or the hard standards of their own laboratory, as long as Qin Guang did not choose Prince, they had an overwhelming advantage over other competitors. But what if Qin Guang was an unreasonable, nationalistic youth? Chapter 1104. Zhuo Jingxi couldn't understand Qin Guang's inexplicable stubbornness. After all, as a researcher, if he wanted to make a real achievement in the field of knowledge, he had to have a tolerant mindset and boldness. Only by doing everything possible to learn and make use of all advanced resources and knowledge could one's knowledge surpass the limitations of national boundaries and reach a higher level. Although there were countries for scientists, there were no countries for science. According to Zhuo Jingxi's original intention, even though she had worked at Prince for half a year, she didn't want Qin Guang to oppose Japan's Waseda University and Korea's Sanxing Group. However, she had an almost blind admiration for Qin Guang, so even though she was puzzled, she didn't question him again. Qin Guang saw through her thoughts and took the initiative to explain to her in the elevator, "Teacher Zhuo, I actually have a reason for doing this." Zhuo Jingxi turned her head and looked at him. She was quite touched that Qin Guang took the initiative to explain to her. This was the benefit of completely conquering a person's heart. Even such a small thing could move her. "It's okay, I'll support you no matter what decision you make." No, being convinced and being convinced are two different things. Let's put it this way. I don't deny Waseda University's global reputation, nor do I deny their ability in the field of scientific research. The same is true for Sanxing. But one thing is very important. No matter how successful they are in other fields, in the field of photocatalysis, they aren't even worthy of carrying our shoes. The fundamental purpose of the cooperation between the two parties is to exchange benefits, but the other party can't provide us with the benefits we need. They can only get benefits from us. Zhuo Jingxi couldn't help but ask, "But isn't it the same for Cavendish Laboratory, Cambridge and MIT?" Qin Guang nodded. "That's true. Then the problem is, we are the ones who take the initiative to give benefits to others. Our fundamental purpose is to better promote photocatalysis and realize our own life ideals. We are almost philanthropists. But if one or two of our partners ruin our mood or even affect our interest and motivation to further promote technology, then not only will we not get benefits from the other party, but we will also be hindered. They may even become a stumbling block to technological innovation. Isn't there a need for such a situation?" Zhuo Jingxi was stunned. She felt that what Qin Guang said was fallacious, but she couldn't refute him. His theory seemed high and mighty, but to put it bluntly, it was as simple as that. Working with Waseda and Sanmei will make him unhappy, and he will not do it. After all this time, this fellow was still willful. Also, it's true that I've never intended to sign an exclusive agreement with anyone. Whoever is willing to pay a satisfactory price, we can provide technical support for them. When the number of our partners increases to 5 or even 10, it doesn't matter if 1 or 2 of them are missing when you look at the world. In addition, although our 5 God-level formulas have an overwhelming advantage, before materials science completely catches up with the development, our production capacity is ultimately limited, and it is impossible to completely monopolize the era of products. It's meaningless to cultivate more partners. The other partners, including Prince and the Chinese Academy of Sciences, have their own profit margins and survival conditions. Their products will also be sold all over the world. Japan and South Korea have used technology monopolies to get a lot of money from us over the years, and we don't give them the technology, forcing them to buy our finished products. This is reasonable. Just like Sony, have they ever given us their camera imaging technology for free? Zhuo Jingxi said, it seems to be true, but they will also buy Prince or Cambridge products. They don't necessarily have to buy our products, right? Chen Guang shrugged. What does it matter? We will give more to others and be more generous to the Chinese Academy of Sciences. Isn't that enough? Let's eat the meat first and then let others drink some soup. The elevator door opened, and Zhuo Jingxi was completely convinced by Chen Guang. She replied to Chen Guang with a sentence that made him blush. You're amazing. You're so far-sighted. I'm sorry, I don't deserve it. Chen Guang secretly wiped his sweat. Fortunately, the old man knew how to bluff, or Teacher Zhuo would have found out that he was a 50-cent fanatic. The two of them entered the conference room, and the people in charge of the major technology companies and institutions all stood up. However, Chen Guang, who wasn't even 21, acted like an old man as he gestured for everyone to sit down with a smile. As soon as everyone sat down, people from many institutions rushed to speak first, intending to seize the initiative in the upcoming public competition. This should have been the most sophisticated technology exchange conference in the world, but in just a few seconds, it turned from a scholarly meeting into a noisy and chaotic market. If it wasn't for the fact that he couldn't put down his pride, Chen Guang felt that they would have fought on the spot. Quiet down. Everyone quiet down. Chen Guang waved the information booklet that Zhuo Jingxi had organized for him and shouted loudly. Seeing that no one paid attention to him, he had no choice but to slam the table heavily. Only then did he manage to control the situation. When the big shots finally quieted down, Chen Guang slammed the table again and said, Everyone stop arguing. It's useless. Everyone has the right to speak, but everyone here is a scholar and an elite from a major institution. You should know how to communicate the most efficiently, right? It's almost midnight now. Shouldn't we use the fastest efficiency to carry out the most public preliminary communication? It's impossible to reach an immediate consensus tonight. Then our main goal now is to improve the understanding between both sides. Then all of you can re-evaluate our actual value. We also need to conduct a more comprehensive evaluation and consideration of your side. As for the real cooperation, we have to go back and talk about it step by step. So, everyone, please calm down first and complete the preliminary communication tonight as soon as possible. Then go back and rest early, right? The big shots first looked at each other and quickly calmed down. They all accepted Chen Guang's words in their hearts. But very quickly they looked at each other in dismay, revealing astonished expressions. They didn't expect Chen Guang to be so mature at the negotiating table and completely control the situation with just a few words. After all, although Chen Guang was famous in the past, other than his personal achievements, the flaws in his character were very obvious. He was obstinate, self-opinionated, arrogant, and unbridled. He vividly displayed almost all the flaws in a young man's character. If it had been a slightly weaker young man, his character would have long since faded into the crowd, or perhaps he would have been beaten to death. So far, not only had Chen Guang not fallen, but he had also become more and more famous. The fields he had dabbled in were getting wider and wider. It could only be because of his unrivaled talent, not because of the so-called mature and prudent character. But after a few more words today, these big shots from the big organizations realized that everyone had been deceived by Chen Guang in the past. This guy had deliberately acted unfamiliar and immature in front of outsiders, but in fact he was simply an old fox and experienced. This guy had hidden himself so deeply that it was terrifying to think about it. Mr. Chen is right. I agree. Everyone be quiet. Mr. Chen, why don't you let us introduce ourselves first? I'm from Wuxia. Chen Guang suddenly interrupted him. I'm sorry, please leave. The old professor from Wuxia was instantly stunned. Mr. Chen, why are you doing this? I'm an Inamoto. Chen Guang rolled his eyes. Don't you understand what I'm saying? I don't care if you're an Inamoto, herbaceous, or woody. I've said before that I won't come into contact with the Japanese representatives. Don't waste your time here. After Chen Guang finished speaking, he turned his face to the side. He looked like he was unhappy and did not want to talk to him. The eyes, nose, and mouth of the famous professor from Wuxia, Junzo Inamoto, were all squeezed together on his wrinkled face. He was so angry that his face was red. He pointed at Chen Guang angrily. How can you be like this? Wuxia is the world's leader in the field of photocatalysts. Your stupid attitude will make it difficult for you in the industry. Chen Guang still ignored him. But the people from the other organizations in the conference room could not take it anymore. You guys already have no chance. Isn't it a waste of time to pester here? What if he angered Qin Guang to the point that he decided to quit? If you guys don't want to talk, we'll talk. In addition, the other organizations were already very afraid of the people from Wuxia. They all saw them as one of their core competitors. Now that there was one less competitor without any bloodshed, everyone was looking forward to it. Professor Inamoto, don't waste everyone's time. That's right. Mr. Qin has already made his position clear. Professor Inamoto, why do you have to do this? Let's go, Professor Inamoto. You've already embarrassed Wuxia. Although they were all upper-class people, each of them was more venomous than the other when it came to adding insult to injury. When it came to personal interests, there was not much difference between a high-class person and a hooligan. It was just that the latter was unreasonable, while the former was verbal and murderous. Just like Professor Inamoto himself, he was not a kind person. Just now he knew that Qin Guang asked everyone to be quiet, but he still seized the opportunity to push Wuxia out. He almost succeeded, but unfortunately he ran into Qin Guang's gun. Professor Inamoto was ridiculed by everyone. Then he looked at Qin Guang's cold face and knew that he could not do anything today. He could only smile bitterly, turn around and leave. Seeing this, the people from Sanxing Corporation looked calm, but they were secretly delighted. The person in charge of Sanxing Corporation, Jin Tailan, was proud of himself. He thought to himself, who asked you Japanese to be arrogant? Who asked you Japanese to think that you're the best in the world? Who asked you Japanese to not admit your crimes? You deserve it. It's natural for the Chinese to hate you. Qin Guang did a good job. First, he helped us eliminate one of our strongest competitors. Then, our terms will be much easier to talk about. They really did not expect that Qin Guang, a billionaire, would have such a flaw in his character. He was almost the same as those Chinese people who only knew how to clamor on the internet. His maturity just now was also an act. Chapter 1105. That's right. Last year, Sanxing's Note 7 had exploded in popularity, and we did not recall our phones back to China. We can still sue those Chinese consumers who accused us of this. The Chinese will still scold us on the internet and enjoy the coupons we give them like beggars. They will continue to buy Sanxing's phones. As the person in charge of China's affairs, Jin Tailan knew about the exploding phones in China last year. Although Sanxing had no choice but to recall their Note 7, they managed to get the majority of the Chinese consumers to change their Note 7 to S7. Their losses were manageable. In Jin Tailan's opinion, Qin Guang's immature behavior might seem like a nationalistic youth, but he's actually childish. As long as he had the chance to negotiate with him, he could easily fall into their trap. He was as stupid as those fake nationalists who scolded Sanxing on the internet and then waved their coupons to buy Sanxing's phones. What a joke. In today's global economy, we can't make money if you boycott us? Either you stop scolding us or you don't buy us. At least you can be considered a man. Just as Jin Tailan was thinking about this, the corners of his lips unconsciously curled up in a subtle arc. It was extremely rich in meaning. Disdain, mockery, joy, pride, all these emotions piled up on his face in an incomparably exquisite manner. After they were mixed together, he appeared incredibly calm. Suddenly, Jin Tailan's body trembled. He suddenly realized something and felt that something was wrong. The Japanese were in trouble, and it seemed like he was also in danger. Recently, our Korea seems to be at odds with China because of some issues. And it was more serious than last year's fried chicken incident. He slowly regained his senses and turned around to meet Qin Guang's gaze. Qin Guang had a faint smile on his face, but in Jin Tailan's eyes, it was not a pleasant smile. Instead, it was a cold feeling. Sir, are you representing South Korea's Sanxing Group? Qin Guang asked like a spring breeze. Jin Tailan subconsciously wanted to nod, but he controlled himself in time and made a decision in his mind at the speed of light. He controlled his expression perfectly, coughed twice and said in fluent Chinese, Mr. Qin, you've made a mistake. I did work for Sanxing before, but just this afternoon I reached an agreement with the Wuxia Longhe Group. Now, I'm representing the Wuxia Longhe Group to negotiate with you. The Longhe Group that Jin Tailan spoke of was, of course, true. On the surface, it seemed to be a wholly owned company in China, but it was actually a puppet enterprise that was completely controlled by the major shareholders of Sanxing Corporation through the offshore holding company, and after layers of dilution in the middle, it was actually a puppet enterprise. As Qin Guang squinted his eyes, Zhuo Jingxi, who was beside him, was already searching for information about the Longhe Group. Qin Guang glanced at him without batting an eyelid, then turned his head to look at Zhuo Jingxi's computer screen. This Longhe Group was indeed a leading company in the field of material science in the country. Although it was not a leading company, it was still one of the industry leaders. On the other side, Jean Tailon spoke again. Mr. Qin, I am a Chinese with a proper bloodline. This was also the best weapon for Jean Tailon to travel in China. Although his ancestral home was South Korea, he had been living in China for many years and could speak fluent Chinese. In addition, he also had yellow skin and black hair. Even his current household registration and nationality were Chinese because of his Chinese wife. As long as he deliberately pretended to be Chinese, he could pass off the fake as the real one. He was not afraid of Qin Guang's investigation. He had studied at Yenjing University since he was in university, and he was admitted through the General College entrance examination in Liaodong province. With Qin Guang's connections and means, he would be able to get to the bottom of it. However, Jean Tailon did not think that Qin Guang would investigate such a small matter. As long as he got through the next few days and signed the contract, everything would be fine. There was no difference between Longhe Group signing a contract with Qin Guang and Sanxing signing a contract with Qin Guang. Now that everyone was in the eastern part of the United States, how could Qin Guang have the time to investigate? Qin Guang's narrowed eyes became smaller and smaller, almost forming a line. He looked as if his interest had been aroused. When the others in the conference room saw this, they panicked. Everyone cursed in their hearts. Jean Tailon, this shameless guy, was playing the sentimental card on the spot. Despicable. They were extremely anxious, but Qin Guang seemed to be completely unaware that he had fallen into his trap and was still chatting happily with him. The others wanted to interrupt their conversation again, but they were troubled by Qin Guang's previous request, so they did not dare to speak rashly. They were so anxious that they could not control themselves. Suddenly, Qin Guang opened his mouth and said, "Which school is better at learning excavators?" Qin Guang also said this in Chinese. The people from the other institutions did not quite understand, but Jean Tailon, who was feeling very proud of himself, suddenly stiffened. He did not understand why Qin Guang would say such nonsense at the negotiating table. Jean Tailon did not understand Qin Guang's intentions, so he asked tentatively, "Mr. Qin, what are you talking about?" Qin Guang did not reply to him but asked again, "Which school is better at learning chefs?" Jean Tailon was still confused. Huh? Qin Guang finally glared angrily at him. Profiteering? Jean Tailon was completely at a loss. What are you talking about? Qin Guang waved his hand. Get lost. Why are you pretending to be Chinese? Get your clothes. You can't even match the secret code. Get lost. Even when Jean Tailon was thrown out by a few other researchers, he still didn't understand how he had been exposed today. My Chinese is so good that I can be a broadcaster, but why was Qin Guang able to see through me with just 3 sentences? Why is that, Sumida? When the scene finally quieted down, Qin Guang then waved his hand. All right, now that the irrelevant people are gone, let's get down to business. Everyone, I have already seen your conditions. At present, it seems that they are more or less the same and there is not much difference. However, in choosing a partner, other than the most direct economic benefits, we also have to consider your company's current research and production conditions. Below are the conditions that we have proposed. Please take a look. Qin Guang waved his hand, and Zhuo Jingxi was responsible for distributing the information. Qin Guang's new revised conditions were similar to what he and Prince had proposed before, but there was no extremely targeted signing bonus. However, the requirements for the target institution to strengthen their research and development capabilities within 3 months were very harsh. In addition, Qin Guang directly changed the ratio of intellectual property held by both parties to a crazy 30-70 ratio for the photocatalyst patents that were produced by the 2 parties later on. Qin Guang 70%, and the others 30%. This kind of request was simply asking for someone's life, but Qin Guang did not intend to negotiate today. He only wanted to set a sky-high price and let others pay on the spot. On the other hand, it was impossible for the other institutions to agree today. At least he had to leave enough time for Prince, who was inexplicably absent, to respond. Of course, not only did Qin Guang put shackles on others, he even personally wrote the other 4 molecular formulas on the blackboard behind him, and allowed others to take photos and bring them back to their own teams for research. Qin Guang could not only give others ridiculous conditions, but he also appropriately gave enough benefits so that they would not feel that the 30-70 ratio was completely unreasonable. He showed his sincerity and strength. Under the premise of such a crushing technological lead, even if it was 30-70, others would still benefit from it. We really do have 5 formulas, not just 1. About half an hour later, the heads of the institutions left one after another with different expressions. No one tried to further negotiate with Chen Guang during the meeting, not even trying to bargain. Everyone had to take this specific request back to the headquarters to discuss it in a high-level meeting. The headquarters experts would speculate on Chen Guang's real intentions, and then propose a negotiation strategy to deal with Chen Guang's harsh conditions. Moreover, the next step of the negotiation must be avoided today's situation where everyone was gathered together, which would make them extremely passive. It was best to communicate privately and then negotiate with both parties instead of competing with each other. This was a revolutionary technological achievement, and it would be too ridiculous to make it into an auction. After everyone left, Zhuo Jingxi stretched her waist and rolled her eyes at Chen Guang. Is there anyone who teases a Korean like you? I thought for a long time before I thought of the next sentence of your 3 sentences. Aren't you making things difficult for me? Chen Guang snorted coldly. It's already good enough that he didn't sing the national anthem. Then he sighed again, holding the information from the University of California's Alamo laboratory in his hand. He said regretfully, Alamo's overall strength is stronger than Prince's, but it's a pity that it's slightly weaker in the field of photocatalysis. There are more political factors in this, so after comparing, Prince is still the most suitable. Zhuo Jingxi also said, Lincoln Laboratory is in a similar situation. Let's go back to sleep first. Chen Guang said as he reached out to hug Zhuo Jingxi's waist. Zhuo Jingxi dodged like a loach. In your dreams. Prince's people will be here tomorrow morning, I'm not going to go crazy with you. Chen Guang was puzzled. How do you know? Zhuo Jingxi looked at Chen Guang with a strange expression. Just now, my former subordinate from Prince's laboratory sent me a message saying that Dr. Wurzman was just tied up and sent back to the laboratory. Chen Guang was speechless. That night, Chen Guang did not manage to accomplish anything. Zhuo Jingxi was determined not to give him a chance. On the other hand, Prince, who had learned his lesson, did not even have to wait for the next morning. At 3 o'clock in the morning that night, Wurzman brought the entire negotiation team and checked into the hotel where Chen Guang was staying. Wurzman's room was right next to Fang Tianyu's room, which was next to Chen Guang's. Other than that, Chen Guang, whose ears were extremely sharp, could clearly hear the sound of steady and long breathing coming from the corridor. Not only did Dr. Wurzman bring a technical team and a negotiation team, but as a local tyrant he even brought along a team of bodyguards. They did not go anywhere, they just guarded the corridor and did not sleep. They guaranteed that when Chen Guang opened the door tomorrow morning, he would see Wurzman's wrinkled face. Spicy chicken shredded. Waseda, Lincoln, Alamo, Cambridge, and Sanxing, all of you are messing with me. If I don't show some strength, you all will think that Prince is a local tyrant for nothing. Wurzman's trip this time was a military order to Bravo. If the negotiation failed, his photocatalyst project team would be gone next year. Stop researching photocatalysis, go research genetically modified potatoes. Chapter 1106. However, the sad Wurzman couldn't find Chen Guang the next morning. The world's #1 martial artist wasn't someone you could find just because you wanted to. If he didn't want to see you, you wouldn't be able to find him. Chen Guang quietly left through the window. He only had one purpose, which was to continue to ignore Prince. There was no special reason, he just wanted to do it. Princes Bravo and Wurzman were anxious. The calmer Chen Guang appeared, the more panicked they became. Chen Guang continued to leak the 4 formulas yesterday, and this matter should have already reached Prince's ears by now. They must be feeling wronged. Wronged why Chen Guang only wrote one to Prince. Wronged why Chen Guang kept ignoring them. Although both sides had some conflicts in the past, business was business. Scientific research was also business. Why did they have to be so stiff? Chen Guang felt like Bravo was regretting his decision. Friend, if you knew this was going to happen, why did you do it? I was in your conference room the day before yesterday, and I sincerely proposed cooperation. You were the one who rejected me first. If you want to find me again, of course, it won't be the same price as before. In fact, Chen Guang could talk to Wurzman at any time. However, if he ignored Wurzman for the whole morning, it would not only make him feel better, but it would also make Wurzman more anxious. Maybe he would be able to get more benefits from the negotiation table. Why not? This was the advantage of technology. Prince didn't understand this before. They didn't have the qualifications to negotiate with Chen Guang at all. After they found out that all the competitors in the photocatalysis field were coming to Princeton like locusts, they completely lost their composure. They could even foresee the future that Chen Guang outlined for them. Losing Chen Guang was equivalent to losing the limitless future of the photocatalysis field. Just like how Intel and agricultural companies monopolized the computer CPU market, latecomers could only eat dust even if they tried their best. The poor Wurtzman did not know that Qin Guang had already left. At 8:30 a.m., Zhuo Jingxi opened the door while rubbing her sleepy eyes. She saw her once arrogant former boss, the real authority, Dr. Wurtzman, standing at the door with a fawning expression. "Dr. Zhuo, are you up? I've asked someone to prepare breakfast in the restaurant. May I invite Mr. Qin to have breakfast with us?" Poor old Dr. Wurtzman, a man of comparatively pure scholarship, it was hard on him to put on such an obsequious show. He deserved it. Previously, in front of Qin Guang and Zhuo Jingxi, he kept on saying, "You Chinese are so and 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 so." Now, in the end, he still had to beg the Wuxia people that he hated and distrusted the most. Zhuo Jingxi did not come back to her senses at first, and Wurtzman was caught off guard. The team of bodyguards that Wurtzman brought slowly surrounded them, but Auntie Mei, who had appeared out of nowhere, stood behind Zhuo Jingxi like a ghost. Being stared at by Auntie Mei's cold eyes, the bodyguards subconsciously did not dare to move an inch. The other 3 Wuxia official soldiers also approached silently. Their faces were stern and intimidating. In terms of actual combat ability, this group of bodyguards who were paid US dollars were no match for the elites of the Wuxia military, not to mention Auntie Mei, who could take on 100 people. Seeing that the atmosphere was a little tense, Zhuo Jingxi quickly said, "Mr. Wurtzman, why are you here so early in the morning?" Wurtzman felt that she was mocking him, but there was nothing he could do. He scratched his head and said, "Dr. Zhuo, I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to meet you and Mr. Chen if I came late." Zhuo Jingxi looked down at her phone and saw that it was a text message from Qin Guang before he left. Then she shrugged helplessly and said, "Mr. Wurtzman, you still miss Qin Guang. He left at dawn." Wurtzman exclaimed, "How is that possible? I had people guard the door. I didn't see him come out." Zhuo Jingxi placed her phone in front of Wurtzman. Qin Guang had already expected this, and the text message was even written in English. "I don't know why, but I suddenly don't like this window. I really want to jump down from it. I'm going out to do something. I'll be back later." Wurtzman felt a little uncomfortable. "You're crazy. Did the window offend you?" "Hey Mr. Wurtzman, I'm really sorry. I don't know what's going on in his head." Wurtzman's old face scrunched up, and his facial features were almost unrecognizable. "Dr. Zhuo, shall we go for breakfast?" Zhuo Jingxi sighed. "Dr. Wurtzman, I know what you're trying to do. We talked to people from other organizations yesterday. But this matter can only be decided by Qin Guang. If he's not here, nothing I say will matter." "But aren't you the developer? Don't you have any say in this?" Wurtzman expressed his disbelief. Zhuo Jingxi smiled. "If I told you that he's my real teacher, you definitely wouldn't believe me. But it's true that I have no say in this matter. I don't even have the right to make suggestions." Zhuo Jingxi used the Chinese Tai Chi fist to push the blame to other people. Of course she had the right to decide. If she insisted, Qin Guang would not object to her giving the patent away. But now she had to cooperate with Qin Guang and put on an act. Zhuo Jingxi also felt the thrill of revenge in her heart. She had made things difficult for Wurtzman when she was working at Prince, and the day before yesterday Wurtzman had also been very rude to her. "This is karma for you, the great Dr. Wurtzman." When it was noon, Qin Guang whistled as he slowly walked back. He went to many places in the morning. First, he disguised himself and went to the Eaton Manor. He still looked the same as before. There was some bad news. His main competitors, William Jones, Ben Affleck, and several other leading actors of the Olympic Games, all came to Princeton. They shamelessly moved into the Eaton Manor. But there was also good news. Mr. James Watson, who he had painstakingly recruited in the American Film Association, did not go back on his word. That morning he took 2 or 3 other old men and left Eaton Manor like thieves. Then they quietly snuck into Princeton cinemas like 007. Old James tried his best. Even though it was his second or third time watching women, he was still deeply immersed in it. However, he had to grit his teeth and support his old friend, who was also immersed in the film, by his side. In order to keep it a secret, he didn't even ask Irma to help. He was relying on his old bones. Compared to the other people in the Film Association, James was obviously a purer person. In the beginning he believed in other people's slander, and subconsciously resisted Qin Guang. However, after Irma pulled some strings and personally went to the cinema, he went back and read the first volume of World Faction that Irma gave him. He immediately came to his senses and became Qin Guang's water supply. He decisively began to help Qin Guang build connections. The reason was that James Watson was more simple-minded than the other members of the film association. Everything he did was for the sake of the film, not his personal interests. When Chen Guang's silhouette appeared in the hotel, Wurzman, who had been waiting outside, immediately noticed it and charged down with his men. Chen Guang was waiting for the elevator. When the elevator door opened, Wurzman walked up to him with a stiff smile on his face. "Mr. Chen, you're back? We've been waiting for you for a long time." As Wurzman spoke, he tried to shake Chen Guang's hand. Chen Guang quietly dodged and put his hands behind his back. He looked at him warily. "Who are you?" Wurzman's smile froze on his face. "Mr. Chen, please don't joke around." "Who's joking with you? Who are you? Get out of the way." Wurzman felt a headache coming on. "It's me, Dr. Wurzman from Prince. Didn't we just meet a few days ago?" Chen Guang acted as if he had a sudden realization. "You're the Dr. Wurzman who said that Chinese people are used to being thieves?" Wurzman almost vomited blood on the spot. "Can you not be so narrow-minded?" "No, I didn't say anything like that, Mr. Chen. I'm here to talk business on behalf of Prince. I'm very sincere, unprecedentedly sincere." Chen Guang didn't want to talk nonsense with him. Instead, he put on a straight face. "Is that so? Sincere? Why didn't I feel it?" Wurzman's hands trembled. His face turned from white to red and then from red to black. He was, after all, an absolute authority in the field of photocatalysis and even in the field of materials science. Today he had endured it again and again, and now he was about to explode. Chen Guang was expressionless. He even decided in his heart that if Wurzman continued to act tough, he would really sentence Prince to death. Your so-called sincerity isn't just coming over here and smiling apologetically. Your apologetic smile isn't even on the point of the problem. I've already pointed it out for you, but you're still acting dumb. You don't even know how to act. What kind of sincerity is that? After a long while, Wurzman finally forced himself to calm down and lowered his noble head. All right. Mr. Chen, I'd like to formally apologize to you for the inappropriate remarks I made about Chinese people a few days ago." Chen Guang tilted his head. "You don't seem to be very willing? Then what if I tell you that I think white people are arrogant and rude? White people's civilization is a civilization of destruction and plunder, while our Chinese civilization is a civilization of construction and creation. China's current backwardness is only temporary. Sooner or later, white people will become second-class citizens. Are you willing to accept that?" Wurzman's face fell. Chen Guang shrugged. "Look at your situation. There's an old saying in China, do unto others what you don't want others to do unto you. To put it bluntly, it means that if you don't like something, don't force it on others." Wurzman replied in a low, muffled voice, "Mr. Chen, I understand." Chen Guang saw that it was about time and felt that he had enough. He waved his hand and said, "Let's go up and talk about the contract." Chapter 1107. Half an hour later, Chen Guang called Pizarro. Prince's head, Dr. Bravo, was also present. The negotiation between the two parties proceeded much faster than with other organizations. After all, Chen Guang and Zhuo Jingxi knew Prince's situation inside out. After Prince's death experience, he knew the consequences, so he behaved much more obediently. At 1:30 in the afternoon, the two parties quickly reached an agreement. They signed, stamped their seals, and took photos. There was no press conference. In the end, the contract signed by the two parties was harsher than Chen Guang's initial proposal. Prince took the initiative to increase the signing fee to $30 million. More losses in the future would be wiped out. With Prince's current wealth, he didn't care about the additional tens of millions. In addition, the two parties also clarified the technical difficulties that Prince had to reach in the next step of the cooperation to consult Chen Guang. "You can't ask me a question like how much is 1 + 1. I'm not Goldbach." Of course, as Prince, they didn't want to rely on Chen Guang and Zhuo Jingxi for nothing. This was because Chen Guang forcibly increased the intellectual property ownership of the two parties to a 60-40 ratio. Chen Guang had 60%, and Prince had 40%. Almost all the research costs of the intellectual property created under this situation were borne by Prince. It was likely that for Chen Guang, it was as simple as a few words or a few pages of calculations. But according to the contract between the two parties, as long as Chen Guang participated in a specific project, Prince had to pay the price. At that time, there would be separate contracts for each specific project. This was the benefit of a technological lead and monopoly. Just like how each iPhone could bring hundreds of dollars of profit to Apple, but the OEM responsible for the assembly would only make a few dollars of profit. After finally signing the agreement, Bravo and Woltzmann were both happy and worried. He was happy that he had finally settled this troublesome matter. Regardless of whether he was happy or not, at least he was on board now. With this layer of relationship, he could repair it in the future and further strengthen Prince's current facilities and equipment advantages in the field of photocatalysis. In the future, Prince would always be able to continue to benefit from it, and the previous billions of dollars of investment would not go to waste. They were worried that they tried to ask for an exclusive agreement but were rejected by Chen Guang. His words were very gentle, but if one were to simply refine them, they could roughly be summarized into these 6 words of mantra. Sign if you want, get out. What could Bravo and the others do? They were angry, but they still had to smile. But Prince's men were quick to rejoice. At this moment, Cambridge, Rockefeller, Lincoln Laboratory, and Alamo Laboratory were all discussing how ridiculous Chen Guang's conditions were and how unacceptable they were. They were trying to figure out how to bargain. In the end, bad news suddenly came from the other side, like a bolt from the blue. Prince's laboratory, which was blocked from the public meeting yesterday, finally took the initiative to negotiate with Chen Guang. They took the initiative to accept Chen Guang's harsh conditions. Now they were one step ahead. The people in charge of the major scientific research institutions in Princeton almost fainted on the spot, but they quickly recovered because Chen Guang released news. They didn't sign an exclusive agreement with Prince's laboratory. This meant that everyone still had a chance. Therefore, in the next few days, the major scientific research institutions that refused to give up took the initiative to go to the door. They didn't care whether they were passive or not, they just wanted to settle this matter. It didn't matter if they didn't have an exclusive agreement, at least they couldn't fall behind. Unfortunately, as the latecomers, they had to face more stringent conditions than Chen Guang's. This was understandable. After all, Chen Guang signed a contract with them for free. In addition, they were more or less behind Prince's laboratory in terms of hard and soft conditions. In the next step of technical cooperation, they were indeed more dependent on Chen Guang than Prince. This time, Chen Guang really did not have to do anything. He only gave a general scope and threw all the specific matters to Zhuo Jingxi. Fortunately, Fang Tianyu was there to help. In terms of legal counsel, Pizarro also officially signed a contract with Tianguang Group on behalf of the Baker law firm, becoming an official consultant for Chen Guang's Tianguang Group in North America. After a few days of negotiation, other than the most miserable Waseda and Sanxing Group, the other scientific research institutions signed contracts with slight differences in details. The weakest research institution would have to face the most stringent contracts. In short, they would lose their rights and humiliate the country. For those who were slightly stronger, it was 5 to 3. 5. Alamo and Lincoln, on the other hand, got 2 points and 8 points, which were envied by others. Prince's laboratory, who was originally wronged, heard that other people signed contracts worse than them, but they were still the happiest. Bravo and Woltzmann immediately calmed down. As long as there are people worse off than us, we are happy. But they would have a headache later because Chen Guang had already communicated with the Wuxia Scientific Research Institute over the phone and reached a verbal agreement. The contract Chen Guang was going to sign with the Wuxia Scientific Research Institute was also a 3 to 7, but it was Chen Guang taking 30% and the Wuxia Scientific Research Institute taking 70%. Chen Guang had no choice. In front of his own people, he was just that honest. He knew a little about the business rules, but he didn't particularly care. Anyway, he was certain that he couldn't lose out. The most important thing was to be happy. I'm happy, I'm willing, that's all. At that time, Chen Guang only confirmed one thing with Zhuo Jingxi. Through his personal connections, he helped Hua Ling and Zhong Yu buy plane tickets from Beijing to New Jersey as quickly as possible to help Zhuo Jingxi. He wanted to use the resources of the laboratory to complete the production of the 5 God-level formulas as quickly as possible. In addition, Chen Guang also chatted with Auntie Mei for a while and gave her some pointers on martial arts. After all, he was the sect master of one of the 27 sects, the Rose Flower sect. Although it was an arrangement from the headquarters, Chen Guang still had to express his gratitude to Zhuo Jingxi, despite being an ex-director of the Rose Flower sect. Aunt Mei was naturally overjoyed. Although she was already at the pinnacle of the skin energy realm, there was still someone stronger than her, like Wenwen, who was in the literature grandmaster realm. There was also Chen Guang, who was said to have surpassed ordinary martial artists. Who didn't want to become stronger? Chen Guang had learned 400,000 unique techniques in the realm of true martial and finally combined them into the self-named True Martial Divine Technique. He could be considered a living martial arts encyclopedia. In just a few words, Qin Guang had answered many of the questions that Auntie May had hidden in her heart for many years. Every time Qin Guang enlightened her, Auntie May would think hard for a long time and then be suddenly enlightened. The two of them chatted for about an hour. The spirit, energy, and spirit in Aunt May's eyes became much more condensed, and the aura that she exposed to the outside also became more restrained. She actually showed signs of returning to the original state. Thank you, Director. It's very beneficial to me. I will never forget Director Bureau Chief's great kindness. Auntie May said with a slightly emotional tone. Qin Guang put his hands behind his back like a master. Auntie May, you don't have to thank me. It's also because you have been stuck at the peak of Peijing for too long. I just happened to be here and answered some of your questions. If it was a martial artist at the level of Bone Jing, it would be useless no matter how much I gave her. Auntie May said, it's easy to say that it's good to have a good foundation, but the most difficult thing is the opportunity at the most critical point. In the whole world only you can do it, Director. Qin Guang felt very comfortable. Auntie May, you're too kind. Zhuo Jingxi came downstairs and was about to go out again. Auntie May said, then I'll go protect Miss Zhuo again. Qin Guang said, wait a minute. Auntie May turned around and was puzzled. What else does Director want? Qin Guang waved his hand. Nothing. I just forgot. Let's talk about it next time. After Auntie May walked far away, Qin Guang confirmed again and again. He thought to himself, I heard that Auntie May is not young anymore. Are the teeth in her mouth fake? Recently, Qin Guang had become a lot more cunning. He was actually doubting what Auntie May said about never forgetting. For Qin Guang, the biggest news came from the other side. After waiting in boredom for 4 whole days, there was finally good news from Eaton Manor. The big shots from the American Film Association had been on a vacation in the Eaton Manor for 10 days. They had done enough work, but Qin Guang was still in Princeton, which made them feel like they were sitting on pins and needles. After some deliberation, they decided that it was about time for them to officially go home. They didn't achieve their original goal of hiding. They didn't know how their whereabouts were exposed, but Qin Guang followed them, which was a pain in the ass. Now that their goal was completely ruined, they might as well go home. Of course, they also thought that it might be a bad coincidence. After all, Qin Guang went to the district court on the second day he came to Princeton and caused something big. This made many senior judges of the Film Association confused. They thought that Qin Guang might have come to Princeton to deal with the photocatalysis issue that had been going on for the past 2 days. Because of this, they scolded President Fred, who decided to come to the Eaton Manor. Look at the place you chose, you could have just found a farmhouse near Los Angeles to hide. We're so unlucky that we won the first prize in the lottery, only to find that the lottery ticket was soiled in our pocket. In the end, they set the evacuation time for the day after tomorrow. They even booked the plane tickets. At the same time, in the past few days, the persistent old James had developed nearly 30 like-minded comrades among the 100 or so Oscar judges who came with him. He had become an underground worker who had infiltrated the Oscar committee. After all, there were still people who were righteous. Old James had infiltrated his friends and everyone had similar ideas. After discovering the great contribution that Qin Guang had made to the film industry, these nearly 30 people each had 2 copies of World Faction, and became Qin Guang's secret fans. Half of them were not personally influenced by old James. Instead, they were influenced by people who were influenced by old James like a virus. It was funny that they wanted to buy World Faction, but they didn't want others to find out. They always had a special reason. They would either go out in person or have their entourage go out. Then, they would go to bookstores or newsstands like thieves, or they would go to Amazon to buy the book. Because the biggest characteristic of this group of people was that each of them had 2 copies of World Faction, they secretly gave their underground organization a name, the World Party. At 2:30 in the morning, in the underground fallout shelter of the Eaton Manor, the 29 members of the World Party were holding an emergency meeting. Mr. Watson, what should we do now? Should we wait for everyone to go home and think of a way to bring Qin Guang to visit them? No, that's not good. People will think that we've been bought by Qin Guang with dollars. They will also be on guard against us like thieves. Then what should we do? Fred and the others are deeply prejudiced against Qin Guang. They all have their own interests in mind. We have to take drastic measures. Mr. Watson, how do we use strong medicine? We have to create a public opportunity for Qin Guang to show his talent in front of everyone and convince them. That way they will have no choice but to put aside their interests and we won't be criticized. How is that possible? There are more than 80 people. They don't really love movies. Friends, have you forgotten the other actors and women? Have you forgotten the theory of World Faction? We will all be dragged into the movie through the screen. If Chen Guang shows his artistic talent in front of all of us, then I think everyone will be dragged into his world of acting. The first batch of members of the World Party fell silent. They felt that James Watson's judgment was reasonable and well-founded. Then let's do it. The day after tomorrow. Tomorrow? That's right, tomorrow. Let's hurry up and set up the stage outside the gates of the Eaton Manor tomorrow. James Watson stood up agitatedly and said, I'll get Chen Guang to prepare now. Let's perform Romeo and Juliet. That's good. That's right. Just like how he performed Thunderstorm in front of the Chinese, Shakespeare's plays can best showcase his abilities. Old James looked at his comrades and clenched his fists. Brothers, let's do it. For the movie. For the arts. Everyone raised their arms in unison, then lowered their voices and spoke excitedly. For the movie. For the arts. When Chen Guang received the call from old James, it was already past 3 in the morning. However, he instantly regained his senses and was in high spirits. Old James was worried that he would not be able to memorize the script of Romeo and Juliet in time, but Chen Guang had no problem with it. Back when he was learning acting, he had even self-destructed once for this movie. He could recite it backwards. Chapter 1108. Chen Guang didn't expect old James to help him to this extent. He heard that they were even planning to pay for the construction of the stage and props out of their own pockets. Chen Guang didn't agree immediately. The old man had so much money that he didn't know how to spend it. He even ordered 2 bowls of porridge for breakfast, one for drinking and the other for pouring. How could he let them pay for it? He firmly disagreed, saying that he couldn't let them pay for it. It was an insult to his American dollars. He could hear his wallet crying. It was being looked down upon. He also said that if they decided to do the stage play today, they would start work tomorrow. Although the stage setting could be simplified, it was in such a hurry. The costumes and props would definitely cost a lot. I'm short of everything but money. He was so persistent. Old James also heard about him knocking on Prince's lab during the day, so he didn't insist and agreed to his request. Right, the stage, costumes and props are easy. I know the most classic version of the stage play like the back of my hand, but am I going to act alone? Chen Guang thought about the role again. Old James said proudly, don't worry. Although my granddaughter Irma isn't famous and is just a fledgling movie actress, I can assure you that she is one of the best stage actors in the United States. But I can assure you that she is one of the best stage actors in the United States. Her graduation gift from the Watson family was Romeo and Juliet. Otherwise, we wouldn't have agreed to let her quit her job as a lawyer and become an actress. Irma's face appeared in Chen Guang's mind. She wasn't stunning, but her temperament was very compatible. She had the air of a noble lady, and her appearance was relatively pure and beautiful. It was very much in line with Juliet's character. All right, thank you, Mr. Watson. Does Irma remember the script? You're welcome. I'll call her right away. She has a good memory and has practiced Romeo and Juliet more than once. No problem, she's the most professional. Thank you very much, thank you very much. See you tomorrow. In the end, Chen Guang managed to restrain himself. Just now, he almost asked old James if he could add a little more passion. The next morning, the 29 members of the World Party walked out of their rooms one after another with dark circles under their eyes. At first, when they met non-gay members of the Film Society, it was awkward and awkward. Hey Mr. Damon, what happened to you? Did you have a nightmare last night? It's fine. This year's nomination round is about to start. I watched a few films recommended to me by my friend last night and accidentally forgot the time. Mr. Damon, you are so dedicated. We plan to go to President Fred's house in a few days to watch it together in the small screening room. If we concentrate on watching, I'm afraid we won't be able to keep up with our old age. Us. It's me and my wife. I don't care about others. Similar conversations took place in every corner of the castle villa. Some sharp-witted people could sense that something must have happened last night, but old James and the others were tight-lipped and determined not to tell anyone. The members of the World Party that old James had roped in were the real veterans of the association. Although they were old and most of them did not participate in the actual management of the association, their reputation and prestige were still there. They also had students all over the world in the industry and had a resounding reputation. They had given real power to young and vigorous people like Fred, but their influence had never weakened. To put it nicely, these people were veterans of old authority. To put it bluntly, they were a gang of old hooligans that others could not afford to offend. Although everyone knew that this group of old seniors with dark circles under their eyes must have done something last night, no one dared to interrogate them if they did not take the initiative to say it. At 9 o'clock in the morning, a shocking theatrical troupe suddenly appeared opposite the castle villa, followed by a particularly professional stage planning team. Everyone in the castle villa was confused and did not understand what was going on. They discussed that a few people should go out and take a look. Old James, who had a guilty conscience, decisively volunteered to go out with a few old men. He patted his chest and said, "Let's go and ask about the situation." They were indeed veterans of the film industry. Old James himself was a retired director, and the other 3 old men also had an old director, an old movie actor, and an old stage actor. They were clearly lying through their teeth with dark circles under their eyes, but their acting was flawless. The younger and vigorous people in the Film Association could not see any clues at all. They knew that there was definitely something wrong, but from the micro-expressions on old James and the others' faces, these industry veterans could not see any reason to suspect them. "I really didn't expect that I, Damon, would be able to improve my acting skills by leaps and bounds in just a few days even though I'm almost 70 years old. I'm a little regretful. I just said I'd stop acting last year, but now I want to act. Damon, this is all thanks to the world's performing arts. Didn't you see Malfoy and Fred fooling us silly? Ah. Mr. Watson, we really have to thank Mr. Chin later." Old James, who was leading the group out of the castle, still had an angry expression on his face. However, he said, "Shh, keep your voice down. We're not done yet. If someone hears us, we'll be in trouble." After walking out of the castle, old James arrogantly grabbed the head of the troupe and scolded him. However, the person who had called the head of the troupe last night was actually him. The head of the troupe also had a fawning look on his face as he explained everything. After a long time, old James walked back with a satisfied smile on his face. Fred and the others, who were standing by the window on the 3rd floor of the villa, saw this scene clearly. "Mr. Watson and the others really aren't playing tricks? President Fred, what are you thinking? What could the old president be up to?" After waiting for 2 minutes, old James and the others went upstairs with smiles on their faces. Old James said with a smile, "Fred, the person leading the other side is Powell Kennan's student, Ginter Cameron. He's the head of the Princeton drama troupe." President Fred nodded respectfully and said, "Old President, you've worked hard. I know Ginter Cameron's name, but this is the first time I've seen him. What is he doing?" "It's not a big deal. Ginter Cameron heard that we're leaving tomorrow and has been very regretful that he hasn't officially visited us these past few days. He feels very bad about it. There were some very special reasons before. Everyone knows that Ginter knows that we don't really want to go out, but now it seems that things have changed. Recently, Qin Guang's attention has been switched to that strange photo catalyst thing. He's been having a big fight with Prince's laboratory. Ginter thinks that we shouldn't be so afraid, so..." A member of the World Party behind Fred, who also had dark circles under his eyes, angrily interrupted old James. "Old James, what are you talking about? When have we ever been afraid of the Chinese? If you want to be afraid, you should be afraid. I, Foreman, have never been afraid of anyone. Idiot. Coward." Old James cursed in his heart. This shameless old foreman must be taking advantage of him verbally. Of course, he could also be too immersed in his role. Okay, Foreman. I know you're the bravest person. You're as brave as a boxer. I especially like the way you look in your navy blue boxers." Old James was mocking the way Foreman looked when Qin Guang came to the castle for the first time a few days ago. Foreman was only wearing a pair of blue boxer briefs and curled up in the shelter. Old Foreman's pale face instantly turned red. "Old James, do you want to get beaten up? I'll let you have a taste of my fist." As he spoke, he was about to rush forward, looking like he couldn't restrain his anger. Old James was also a hot-tempered person in the past. He was not a kind person. He rolled up his sleeves and rushed forward. "Come on. Do you think I'm afraid of you?" Fred, Damon, Malfoy, and the others spent a lot of effort to pull these 2 angry old lions down. They were all sweating from exhaustion. Foreman, who hadn't been able to show off his boxing skills, left in a huff. Old James tidied up his appearance while explaining to Fred. It turned out that in order to express his respect for the Motion Picture Association, Gene Cameron had meticulously prepared a classic stage play, Romeo and Juliet. He had been preparing for this a few days in advance. He had planned to send out a public invitation after everything was ready, but he didn't expect them to leave so soon. That was why he hurriedly brought people to set up the stage early in the morning. He was ready to start in the evening at the latest. After listening to old James, Fred muttered, "So that's how it is? Old James nodded. Of course. Everyone knew that we didn't dare to go out, and it wasn't convenient for them to ask us directly. So, Gene Cameron decided to build a stage opposite our villa building. We only need to walk out of the villa. Malfoy Bentler, who was next to him, said, "That's perfect. We can advertise to the public that in addition to coming to Princeton for a vacation, our other purpose is to participate in the stage play that Gene Cameron prepared for us. It's been many years since someone performed Shakespeare's classics in public. It suits our identity." Old James was very satisfied with Malfoy's cooperation. He continued, "That's true. Although everyone knows we can't really let people think that we're afraid of the Chinese. We need a way out." Fred still felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't see through it. Plus, he couldn't question Old James in public. "Didn't you see that he and Old Foreman almost fight? Maybe it's all my fault. If I hadn't chosen Princeton as the location for my vacation, none of this would have happened." Fred silently blamed himself. "All right, I'll call King Cameron and thank him. I'll also ask him to thank Mr. Keenan for not being able to come." The farce of Old James and Foreman almost getting into a fight seriously interfered with Fred's judgment. His originally suspicious mind was blinded, and he really thought that Gordon Cameron was so kind as to prepare a surprise for everyone. Chapter 1109. Outside, at 9:15 in the morning, Captain Gold called the stage construction team to start work. The noise was so loud that the ears of the people in the villa hurt. However, they did not feel uncomfortable. Instead, they were even more excited about Gold Cameron's enthusiasm. Qin Guang threw out a lot of US dollars like snowflakes. Gold Cameron did not bring a team at all. Instead, it was the elite teams of several exhibition companies in Princeton. Under the unified management of Gold Cameron, these teams worked together in an orderly manner. They were each responsible for different parts of the stage, clothing, and so on. The progress was extremely fast. In the past, people used to say that the Chinese were efficient in construction and laughed at the Europeans and Americans for being inefficient. However, today's reality proved that this was a fallacy. There was only one reason for inefficiency, and that was not enough money. When the weight of US dollars was enough to make a man crawl out of his wife's belly, all problems were not problems. In just a few hours, opposite the Castle Villa, a luxurious stage tailored for Romeo and Juliet appeared out of thin air. It was built faster than the ancient city of Rome, which was built in 7 days. Although it was not as exquisite as the modern, high-tech and luxurious stage that others had formerly prepared for several months, it was definitely above the standard in terms of the stage scenery, lighting effects, basic moving background, and so on. It was not far from the famous musical version of Romeo et Julie that was held in Paris, France on February 14, 2000, starring Damien Sugg and Cecilia Cara. It had to be said that this was due to the rapid advancement of science and technology in the past decade or so since 2000. For example, the combination equivalence, which was extremely difficult to achieve in the past, could now be achieved with a high-quality and expensive LED nano spotlight. In the past, the extremely cumbersome layout of the background panel when switching scenes could now be completed with a high-resolution OLED large screen. As for the digital special effects or real scenes that needed to be played on the background screen, with the double effect of US dollars and connections, Gold Cameron directly contacted the copyright holder of the Paris version of Romeo and Juliet, and bought the audio and video copyrights that they left behind. When the time came, he could directly project it on his big screen. As for the background music, he had also used countless connections to combine the most classic copyrights of all the major copyrights, and then randomly selected and combined them. This sudden appearance seemed simple, but in fact, it was the perfect embodiment of contemporary action. Its true cost was as high as nearly 10 million US dollars. But to Qin Guang, this wasn't a problem at all. For the sake of being a god in the world of acting, for the sake of survival, no matter how much money he had, he would not even blink. In any case, it was extorted from the head of Prince's laboratory, so he didn't feel any heartache spending it. In fact, it felt especially good, as if he was spending someone else's money. Although it was actually his, it came too easily. He felt as if he had reaped something without sowing. It was even easier than buying a lottery ticket. In addition, during the construction of the stage, related news quickly appeared on social networks in Europe and the United States. Shakespeare's classics. A gift from the Princeton Repertory Company. The Oscar judges go to Princeton to watch Shakespeare's play, last break before their busy daytimeless classics, Romeo and Juliet. Who on earth has the guts to perform Shakespeare's classic play in front of the Oscar judges? All kinds of news articles appeared on the internet in the morning, like a crazy virus. Obviously, this was just a trivial matter, but it inexplicably received unprecedented attention in one day. This was very strange. Even though the guests of the stage were almost more than 90% of the American Film Association, even though the performance was Shakespeare's play Romeo and Juliet, in fact, even though not many people were willing to admit that traditional Chinese culture was declining, in the mainstream of today's European and American youth, Romeo and Juliet was still a culture that was out of date, even though not many people were willing to admit it. Simply put, it was Odette. Therefore, this matter should not have caused such a sensation. People with intentions and insiders knew that there must be other forces behind it. Even the members of the Oscar committee in the Castle building felt that something was wrong, but they didn't have any solid evidence. Every time they started to question it, some senior members of the World Party would jump out and use all kinds of tricks to interfere with their line of sight and their thoughts. At the same time, these veteran members of the World Party also used their own social media accounts to promote King Cameron's Shakespeare play. They even let many of their students and juniors promote it. They also took credit for the storm on the internet. Look, we all said this and so reposted my post. Isn't it normal for it to become popular? Do you think we're getting old? That we are outdated? That we have no influence, that our words do not matter? Fred and the rest of the younger generation had no way of dealing with these old men and women. They had no choice but to believe them. King Cameron picked up a big bargain. His Princeton Repertory Theater had received a lot of fees, but money was not a big deal. Through this matter, he successfully made old James and the other veteran members of the American Film Association owe him a favor. Most importantly, his repertory theater inexplicably became popular. Thinking of Irma Watson, who was rehearsing with many leading actors in the Princeton Theater, King Cameron's heart was filled with joy. Others might not be familiar with Irma, but as a veteran theater director, King Cameron knew very well that Irma was definitely one of the most talented and best female theater actors in the United States. However, there was one thing that particularly confused him. Old James specifically emphasized to him that the other members of the team would directly use the ready-made members of his repertory theater. However, for the male lead who played Romeo, Old James specifically told him to make it clear to the male actor that he was only a temporary candidate to assist in the rehearsals. When it was time to actually go on stage, there would be someone else. This had to be said in advance to avoid any complications. In addition, Old James also made it clear to King Cameron that the young actor must also be kept a secret. King Cameron heard Old James's serious tone and did not dare to be careless. Fortunately, he had always been a man of his word in the repertory theater. Although the young actor was regretful, he did not dare to disobey him. Hearing the seriousness in Old James's voice, Kent Cameron dared not be careless. Fortunately, he had always been a man of his word in the troupe, and although the young actor was sorry, he dared not disobey him. Even Captain Gold himself was at a loss when he was busy. Who would be playing Romeo? What was old Watson up to? Forget it, this is not something I should be concerned about. However, at this time, among the people rehearsing in the Princeton Theater, only Irma vaguely guessed something. Although Old James did not explicitly say it to her, her intuition told her that Romeo must be played by Chen Guang. Although Old James did not explicitly say it to her, her intuition told her that Romeo must be played by Chen Guang. After the triple baptism of Woman, World's Pie, and 1900, Irma Watson had long become a crazy fan of Chen Guang. If Chen Guang had been recognized as a god in the acting world, Irma would have instantly upgraded from a crazy fan to a true fanatic. When Irma thought about how he would be on the same stage as Chen Guang in the evening, he couldn't help but feel a little overwhelmed. "Miss Irma, you're using too much force." The chief director, who had been pulled in at the last minute, immediately noticed the problem and reminded her loudly. Irma waved her hand apologetically. "Sorry, let's start again." More and more reporters came to Eaton Manor. No matter how strange the situation was, since Romeo and Juliet was already a hit, and the big shots of the American Film Association were involved, the reporters would naturally be alerted. Apart from that, people from all the major U.S. webcast platforms and TV stations also appeared one after another within a day, looking for Captain Jean Tay to discuss the webcast and TV broadcast. King Cameron wanted to compare the options, but in fact he had no say in the matter. Old James had told him early on that the live broadcast would be handed over to YouTube. If Must Die was interested, they could pay for it together almost free of charge. The live broadcast was handed over to UBC, a cable TV station that was not at the top of the rankings, but could also be watched by all of America. The price was also ridiculously low. King Cameron did not quite understand Old James' purpose. They had spent so much money to complete the preparations in one day. The live broadcast was almost the only way to recoup the funds, but they had given it away for free. They only had one request. They hoped that the other party would match the publicity resources as much as possible so that the stage play, which had been built from scratch in one day, would have a greater impact. In fact, old James had not thought it through, but Qin Guang's thinking was very simple. Tech companies like YouTube and Must Die had helped him a lot, providing him with timely help. Business was business and favors were favors. He did not know how foreigners did business, but as a Chinese, Qin Guang was well versed in the ways of the world. He had to return the favor. UBC had helped him with the publicity under great pressure. Although they had received a lot of fees, there were many TV stations that went back on their word at the time. Now they were returning the favor. The most important thing was that the lower the fee he charged others, the more money they had to spend on marketing and promotion. By 6 o'clock in the evening, there was a sea of people outside the castle villa in Eaton Manor. The small stage was filled with people. In order to reserve seats for the big shots of the American Film Association, King Cameron had even temporarily hired 2 security companies to maintain order on the scene. In addition to the nearly 200 reserved seats, there were all kinds of seats in the surrounding areas. This was an open-air performance, so there was no need to pay for tickets at all. Anyway, the place was only so big. It was first come, first served. The sea of people spread from the bottom of the stage, and even the farthest seats were placed at the entrance of the castle villa 50 meters away. There were about 10,000 people, half of whom were locals of Princeton, and the other half were art lovers who had heard about the event today. Some drove, some took a bus, and some flew over from the eastern United States. There were all kinds of reporters with all kinds of cameras, and even people from the top 5 TV stations in the United States were there. Further away there was a live broadcast car with their logo on it. Although these TV stations were not qualified to broadcast the scene on the stage due to copyright reasons, it was not a copyright violation to interview or even broadcast the audience around the open-air performance. Even old James, the mastermind behind the scenes, was shocked by the scene. Fred and the other members of the Film Association, who did not know what was going on, felt even more uncertain. Chapter 11:10. President Fred stood by the window and looked down in a daze. Why are there so many people here? Oh my God. Old James coughed softly. Maybe it's because no one has performed Shakespeare's plays in public for a long time? Everyone thinks that Shakespeare is past his prime and always deliberately avoids his works. They even forcibly make things that don't look the same in the pursuit of novelty. In fact, people's desire for classics has been suppressed for a long time, so it was easily reignited? Malfoy Bentler, who was next to him, said, "It's possible, but it's very disadvantageous for Gent Cameron. If his performance in such an influential public performance is mediocre, the impact will be very bad." President Fred nodded. Not only will it be disadvantageous for Gent Cameron, but will also be implicated. After all, this is a show he prepared for us. If he messes up, we'll also become a joke. There was silence in the hall of the huge castle villa. Inexplicably, they had been pushed to the teeth of the storm. At 6:30 in the afternoon, Irma, who had finished her makeup, and the rest of the cast arrived late by bus. At the same time, Qin Guang was sitting in a business car in the corner of the parking lot of Eaton Manor. Old Foreman's granddaughter was touching up his makeup. The 28-year-old girl was a top special effects makeup artist who had risen to fame in the American industry in recent years. Her task was not simple. She had to transform Qin Guang's highly recognizable Asian face into a young European aristocrat, Romeo. Fortunately, she was a professional special effects makeup artist. She had been fine-tuning Qin Guang's face since noon. She had already completed most of the work before coming over. Now, she was only making the final adjustments and touching up the makeup. At this moment, Qin Guang's complexion was slightly paler than usual, but not by much. He wore contact lenses in his eyes. His eyes had changed from the deep black of the Wuxia people to the sapphire blue of the Atlantic Ocean. In addition, a little prosthesis had been added to the surface of his nose. It was not a crude prosthesis, but a new type of silicone prosthesis that fit perfectly with the human skin. There were not many prostheses used and they fit perfectly. They only made his nose look a little taller. As for Qin Guang's hair, the girl originally wanted to give him a wig, but Qin Guang asked her to dye his hair a beautiful bright gold. Although everything happened in a hurry, Qin Guang knew that tonight's Romeo and Juliet was extremely important. If he succeeded, his trip to the United States this time would almost achieve 99% of his goals. It was almost equivalent to announcing the official success of the Olympic Games. He seemed cynical, but few people could really understand the importance of this matter to him. But this time, his performance conditions were not as good as before. As a Chinese, he had to make up as Romeo and add something to his face, which would more or less affect the effect of his performance. Moreover, this was a live stage play without post-production special effects, which was even more difficult. Everyone knew that a play or stage play was the place that tested an actor's acting skills the most. If there were no NGs, there would be a chance to start again. It was also the closest contact with the audience. Every detail of the performance would fall into the eyes of others. Every flaw in the scene would be infinitely magnified in the hearts of others. That was why so many male idols had acted in countless movies and TV shows, but never dared to walk into a small play theater. Was it because they thought that acting in plays did not pay enough? Of course not. Everyone knew how much reputation one could get from acting in a play. For a professional actor, reputation was almost equivalent to money. They didn't go because they didn't dare to. They couldn't bear the negative impact of bad reviews after acting in an embarrassing way. Although Qin Guang was the greatest performing artist in the history of mankind, what he was doing now was a magnificent feat that had never been done in the history of performing arts. He had been in the industry for less than a year, and this was his first time on the big screen, but he was going to fight for the highest award in the world of film art. Perhaps in the opinion of some people in the circle, the Oscar was not the most authoritative award, but in the eyes of ordinary people, no one could deny that the Oscar was the most famous and influential film art award. Therefore, Qin Guang decided to keep improving. He wanted to treat this matter with an unprecedented state, even more serious than when he acted in Women and Thunderstorm. He had to do everything in his power to the best of his ability. Okay, Mr. Chen, it's a success. At first I was really worried that it would look strange, but now it seems that the effect is good. I have to admit one thing. Although you're not a particularly stunning handsome guy, you really look good now. Ah, thank you for the compliment. Your makeup is really good. Clothes make the man. With such a great makeup artist like you, if I still look ugly after makeup, then my life would be too miserable. Foreman's granddaughter looked up and down at Qin Guang with the bright light in the car. She was very satisfied. Qin Guang took the mirror, looked at himself, and slightly tilted his head. Yes, very satisfied. He felt a lot younger all of a sudden, just like how handsome Leonardo was when he played Romeo at the age of 21. Bah. I'm only 21 years old. Alas, I've lived too long and my mentality has become old. Time is really scary. Thank you, Miss Evelyn. Say hello to Mr. Foreman Clement for me. Evelyn tilted her head. Okay. Mr. Chin, I haven't seen you recite any lines since this afternoon. Is it really okay? Qin Guang smiled and shook his long blonde hair, making Evelyn's face bleed. Evelyn, you have to know that standing in front of you is a great performing artist that has never been seen in this world. Aren't we sitting in the car? Ah. Qin Guang waved goodbye to Evelyn and walked towards the stage in a well-ironed suit. This time he didn't have to hide. He almost didn't recognize himself. Now he looked like a standard European and American handsome guy, not much different from Lil Li when he was at the peak of his looks. Qin Guang didn't dare to look in the mirror too much. He was afraid that he would turn gay because of his handsomeness. Jean Tay Cameron was standing at the intersection with 2 or 3 people, looking around nervously. According to his agreement with old James last night, the male lead should be arriving soon. Jean Tay was quite unsure. Now that the matter had blown up, the attention was beyond imagination. This had become a global event. Even if he let the actors of his troupe perform, Jean Tay felt that it was very likely that they wouldn't be able to stop the show. If it was just an average performance, social media would definitely explode tomorrow. When that happened, his Princeton drama troupe would become a laughingstock and be ruthlessly mocked for overestimating themselves. How stupid and ignorant did they have to have the guts to put on such an ordinary play in front of the senior judges of the American Film Association? And it's Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. Aren't you afraid that Shakespeare's coffin can't hold it down? Didn't you see the once classic Romeo actor Lil Li post a comment on his social media? Unfortunately, I just got off the plane from New York to London. If there was a shuttle, I would really want to go back to New Jersey immediately. I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of Romeo President Fred and the others will see. I wish the Princeton drama troupe all the best. Is this guy really wishing me well? Isn't he mocking or cursing me? After waiting anxiously for a long time, Jean Tay finally saw a tall and handsome young man walking toward him from afar. He was holding the secret signal that both parties had agreed on. It was a rose that only had a bud left. Hello, sir, you're finally here. It's already crowded over there. Let's hurry and change. Judging from the appearance, Jean Tay felt a little more at ease. This young man looked quite handsome, and his walking posture was also very proper. It was obvious that he was from a noble family and had a good upbringing. Oh, thank you, Mr. Cameron. You've worked hard today. It's no trouble at all. Then how should I address you? Just call me Blake, Mr. Cameron. Okay, Mr. Blake. Let's go. Our friends are waiting anxiously. After a simple chat, Jean Tay Cameron felt a little better. This young man was definitely from an ancient noble family. Listen to his standard Verona aristocratic accent. If he had spoken in Italian instead of English, people would have thought that Romeo had really come to life in the real world. Could it be that he was really a descendant of the Montague family? By the way, Mr. Blake, do you know Italian? Yen% at #yen #. Chin Guang immediately switched to Italian, which Jean Tay couldn't understand. On the other hand, his assistant, who was also from Italy, was stunned. Oh my God. Philip, what's wrong? Jean Tay Cameron asked doubtfully. Philip exclaimed, Mr. Blake's pronunciation is so pure. It's exactly the same as my classmate from the Verona Rusco family when I was studying in Milan. Jean Tay Cameron was really shocked this time. Could it be that he really picked up a treasure? Did the Montague family really exist? The young master of the Montague family came to act as his ancestor, Romeo? Friend, don't make a fuss. Okay, we're almost there. Let's hurry up. It'll take some time to change. Okay, respectable Mr. Blake. Jean Tay Cameron had completely forgotten something. A few days ago, there seemed to be another mysterious person called Blake who caused quite a stir in Eaton Manor and the North American music industry. However, he had heard that Blake was a blind man, while this young man had a pair of sapphire blue eyes. His gaze was bright and piercing, and he was a noble young master with an imposing appearance. They shouldn't be the same person, right? As the time for the official performance approached, the senior members of the Motion Picture Association, led by President Fred, finally walked out of the castle building they had been holed up in for more than 10 days under the watchful eyes of the public. They lined up and walked towards the gate of the villa's garden. The large iron gate, decorated in medieval European style, slowly opened with an ancient creak. The crowd outside split into two groups at the signal of the security guards. Looking at the 6-meter-wide pure wool carpet that led from the gate of the villa to the gold-rimmed chairs dozens of meters away, Fred only wanted to curse. *CK. Do you have to make it so formal? Are you guys going to fire 2 more salutes? If you can't put on an earth-shattering performance today, all of us will be embarrassed in front of the whole world tomorrow. Just as Fred was thinking about this, loud bangs could be heard from afar. Fred, Malfoy, and the others' faces were ashen. They almost collapsed on the spot. *TU banana. There really are salutes. Old James and the others also staggered. Is Jean Tay Cameron crazy? Aren't we playing a little too much? Welcome guests. Welcome to Romeo and Juliet, presented by the Princeton Repertory Theater. First of all, thank you, friends from the Motion Picture Association, for attending the graduation ceremony specially prepared for young actors by our Repertory Theater. The witty Jean Tay Cameron, as the head of the play and a part-time host today, despicably lowered the standard of today's performance. Following Jean T's speech, the audience went into an uproar. What? Just a graduation ceremony for young actors? Is he joking? He never said that in the previous publicity. That's right. I even heard that Emma Watson will play Juliet. How can it be a weird graduation ceremony for young actors? I even came all the way from Washington for this. Are the people from the Princeton Repertory Theater crazy? Is he joking? The people below the stage began to whisper. YouTube, Must Die, and UBC, who had the live broadcast rights, were also confused. This was different from what everyone had agreed on. As for the other live broadcast platforms and TV stations, they were in big trouble. Although they couldn't film the scene on the stage, they could point the camera at the excited audience, which was more exciting than on the stage. President Fred and the others, who had been sitting anxiously in the front row of the stage, felt a great sense of relief. It seemed that Jean Tay Cameron also knew that the situation was not good. He said this as if he wanted to take the blame alone. What a good buddy. Old James and the others were indignant. What graduation ceremony for young actors? You're insulting the founder of the International Performing Arts. At this moment, a plane from Los Angeles to New Jersey had just landed at Newark Liberty Airport. No one noticed that a fat old man rushed out of the plane in a hurry. He was wearing sunglasses and his steps were very fast. After leaving the airport, he took a taxi and went straight to Eaton Manor. Damn, I should have watched the news earlier. If I had seen it yesterday, I wouldn't have been late today. Missing Chen Guang's performance of Romeo and Juliet will be the biggest regret of my life. I, Donald Joshtan, must see that incredible Chinese man perform on the stage with my own eyes. Chapter 11:11. At the same time, on the stage at Eaton Manor, the crowd would have been in an uproar if President Fred had not taken the initiative to help him suppress the situation. After all, Gordon Cameron had taken the initiative to foreshadow the situation for the sake of everyone's reputation. In fact, he had admitted defeat in public for everyone's sake. President Fred thought that Gordon had good intentions, and Gordon was a student of Powell Kennan, a respected veteran in the industry. Although they weren't familiar with each other, he was indeed one of them, so he couldn't treat him like this. Meanwhile, in China, tens of thousands of miles away, Big Beard Deng, who was almost paralyzed from exhaustion in order to coordinate with the domestic promotion of women, gave himself a rare day off today. As a senior director in the industry, of course he would receive heavy industry news from the United States. He had heard about Luo and Zhu at 10 o'clock last night. Based on Big Beard Deng's understanding of Chen Guang, although the news did not mention that Chen Guang would be involved in the mysterious stage play, he had a feeling that this guy was definitely involved. It was too much of a coincidence, and the strangeness of this matter was very much in line with Chen Guang's style of doing things. Because he went to Los Angeles, then Donald Joshtan streaked, and then the Oscar judges went to Princeton, New Jersey. Then, while Chen Guang was fighting a lawsuit, a play Romeo and Juliet popped up inexplicably on the other side. It was impossible to say that Chen Guang was not involved. Because of this, although Big Beard Deng was very tired, he still asked Yang Shi to wake him up at 6 o'clock in the morning. After breakfast, the two of them stayed in front of the large-screen TV to watch the foreign broadcast of UBC. Director Deng, do you think Chen Guang might be on stage? But isn't he from the Princeton Repertory Theater? I've heard of Gordon Cameron. He's a well-known figure in the North American theater industry. What Yang Shi meant was that he didn't think this matter had much to do with Chen Guang. Big Beard Deng shook his head. No, my intuition tells me that this must have something to do with Chen Guang. It's even possible that he did it. As the first diehard fan of Chen Guang, Yang Shi was doubtful. He's Chinese. Can he play Romeo? Big Beard shook his head, then nodded. Forget it. We'll know when we keep watching. The performance will start in 5 minutes. Won't we know everything then? He is determined to win the Oscar this time. I think that as long as he can prove his ability, he will do anything. Yang Shi nodded in agreement. She looked at the big screen as she stuffed a bun into her mouth. That's possible. His skin color and appearance can't hide his acting skills. On the other side of Yanjing, Jin Shirui and Jiang Yage had also gotten up early and were watching the TV attentively. The two of them were much more confident than Big Beardy. Jiang Yage gritted her teeth and said, "It must be our dear Romeo." Jin Shirui nodded. I didn't expect him to come up with this idea. Then we have to thank those old fools for giving us a chance. They are all gathered together. Chen Guang will definitely do something to catch them all. Don't say that, Solomon. It's as if Chen Guang is a bandit. Jiang Yage chuckled. Isn't that right? He looks no different from a bandit. It's like he's going to rob the Oscars. If he wants to rob the Best Actor throne, then he has to rob the brains of those old fools first. Let them personally experience the power of world-class acting. Jin Shirui said, I hope he succeeds in one go. No, he must succeed in one go. If he fails, it must be the fault of the actress who plays Juliet. She'll drag him down. Jin Shirui smiled and patted Jiang Yage on the shoulder. You don't even know who is playing Juliet, do you? Who? Irma Watson. No way. How did Chen Guang invite her? It was obvious that Irma wasn't well known among Europeans and Americans, but as a top drama actress and talented young performing artist who had risen to fame in recent years, Irma had a resounding reputation in the circle. Even in China she was well known. Jin Shirui tilted her head and thought for a moment. Solomon, do you think it's difficult for him to attract girls? Jiang Yage was silent for a moment. That's true, but I'm not worried. He's picky now. Irma's acting is good, but it doesn't meet his aesthetic standards. How do you know? He said he likes Chinese girls. Also, if she must have blonde hair and blue eyes, then she must have big waves. That can't be right. He also has requirements for hair. Jiang Yage took a deep breath. Big waves, they have to be read separately. Jin Shirui, although Jiang Yage and Jin Shirui were young, they had become famous earlier. In recent years they had been to Hollywood more or less several times. They were deeply touched by these Oscar judges who talked about art but were very arrogant and conceited in their bones. Both of them knew how difficult it was for Qin Guang to become an emperor in acting, but they understood Qin Guang. They knew that he would never give up once he was serious, so they never tried to persuade him. Anyway, they wouldn't be of much help if they followed him. The only thing they could do for him was think of ways to promote women in the country and help him clear his worries. No matter what he did overseas, as long as the domestic base was stable, it wouldn't collapse. In the eyes of Jin Shirui and Jiang Yage, the Oscar was the icing on the cake, but the domestic box office and reputation were the foundation of their career. Of course, the two of them sincerely hoped to help Qin Guang win an Oscar, but they couldn't do it even if they were the most powerful second generation in China. It wasn't like in China. As long as Qin Guang was willing with his relationship with Jin Jiang, he could easily win from the Golden Horse Award to the Golden Husky Award. However, it wasn't the same overseas, especially for the Oscars. Although they were politically correct playthings that flaunted art, they still had to do some superficial work to convince the public. In addition, their political correctness was the political correctness of the American president, not the political correctness of the Chinese aristocrats. Finally, at 7 o'clock with the music, the lights on the stage dimmed, and the crowd quickly quieted down. The legendary graduation ceremony of Romeo and Juliet, 4 young actors, had officially begun. Kent Cameron, who was standing under the stage, clenched his fists tightly and looked up at the stage with full attention. He had never been so nervous before. He was even more nervous than when he had led the drama troupe to the Golden Vienna Hall. At first, he was happy because of Qin Guang's aristocratic style, but he gradually calmed down. After all, he didn't know Blake at all. This was a live stage play that attracted worldwide attention. Now Kent couldn't even trust the professional actors in his own troupe, let alone others. He was a little afraid that the aristocratic young man named Blake would mess it up on the stage. That would be disastrous. With a brief narration, the background of the story in Verona was briefly explained. The scene changed and went directly to the banquet hall where Romeo and Juliet met for the first time. This was a play that everyone was familiar with. Most of the people who came here were also fans of the art of film or drama itself. In order to maintain the pace of the stage play, the story background was particularly brief. The banquet hall, which was decorated in the medieval Italian style, appeared in front of the audience under the gradually brightening lights. When the bright lights reached their peak, the originally still people on the stage moved in an instant. The change from extreme silence to liveliness took less than a second. The quiet stage instantly turned into a bustling aristocratic ball. In the lively ball, the aristocratic guests dressed in luxurious clothes came and went, sometimes whispering to each other, sometimes brave young men would send invitations to beautiful aristocratic ladies, and then they would dance together on the dance floor. Many of the audience could not help but frown slightly. Although the actors on the stage performed very professionally, the purely digital background, coupled with the actors' slightly stiff and rigid performance, still cast a layer of haze over this classic stage play. Of all the actors on stage so far, probably only Irma, who played the role of Juliet, performed well. Her every frown and smile revealed a sense of spirituality. As for the others, they were far from being able to perform well. This was a qualified performance, but it was not worthy of today's fame and occasion. Out of etiquette, people did not whisper to each other, but if there was no change, the scene would quickly deteriorate. King Cameron really wanted to dig a hole and hide in it. He knew that his troupe members had tried their best. However, the rehearsal time was indeed too short. It was already considered very professional for everyone to be able to perform without any obvious flaws. However, he still wanted to ask for more. He wanted everyone to perform perfectly and reach the true state of performing art. It was really too much. King Cameron looked down the stage again. The dim lights illuminated the slightly frowning faces, and he let out a long sigh. He could roughly imagine the expression of the audience in front of their televisions all over the world. Perhaps after today's performance, my Princeton drama troupe will consider moving and changing its name? Forget it, the greater the loss this time, the more old President James will owe me. Old President James was a very kind person, and there was no need to take the initiative to mention it. The more serious the loss, the more he would find a way to compensate. With old James's connections and reputation in the industry, even a simple greeting would be enough to bring my Princeton drama troupe to a higher level. The benefits could be expected, but the entire troupe would be reborn, and they were very reluctant to leave. President Fred and the others were also very nervous, but old James and the others felt more at ease. This stage was actually produced by them, and they also knew who was playing Romeo. Everyone in the world party had confidence in Qin Guang, and they did not believe that Qin Guang would mess up the performance. Suddenly, the people on the right side of the stage fell silent again. Romeo, played by Qin Guang, trotted out of the darkness with his friend. The two young people ran forward quickly, and Romeo's friend turned back to urge them. Romeo, played by Qin Guang, walked forward quickly while tidying up his mask. Jin Shirue and Jiang Yage, who were separated by the ocean, suddenly froze. The two of them forgot what they were just saying. Big Beard Deng's brows furrowed tightly at first, but he soon unconsciously relaxed. Although Qin Guang's appearance had changed a lot, the moment he stepped on the stage, Big Beard Deng was 100% sure that this was Qin Guang. She didn't know what he had done, but for some reason, when he appeared on the screen, a salty and moist smell that seemed to come from the Mediterranean floated out of the screen. Even the lights that shone down on the stage suddenly had an old-fashioned feel to them. Others didn't understand what was going on, but Big Beard Deng and Jiang Yage did. This was Qin Guang's incredible acting skills. The moment he stepped on the stage, he released a domain-like power that only belonged to him. His stage, the audience below the stage, and even the live audience in front of the TV were all enveloped in his domain-like power. He was really serious. Not only Big Beard, Jin Shirue, and Jiang Yage in front of the TV, but other actors, members of the drama troupe, members of the Oscar committee, staff of the major live broadcasting platforms and TV stations, as well as ordinary audiences, had a more profound and unique feeling. A moment ago they were still frowning with anger on their faces. But the moment Qin Guang stepped on the stage, inexplicably, the expressions on their faces slowly relaxed. It was not a simple knowing smile, but a sudden state of complete relaxation. They looked like they had been sprayed with a hypnotic spray. But they didn't realize it at all. In an instant their minds were completely blank. At this moment, the banquet hall on the right side of the stage, which was completely frozen under the lights, suddenly moved again. This was a little earlier than the time they had arranged for the rehearsal. Originally, the people inside should have moved when Romeo and his friends ran to the so-called main entrance of the banquet hall. But no one noticed this. Even the chief director in charge of the rehearsal stood at the side of the stage in a daze. Irma and the other actors couldn't be blamed for this. At this moment they had even forgotten who they were and that they were acting. They had even forgotten their names and identities. They had become real Italian nobles living in Verona. Juliette Capulet sat in the corner of the banquet hall. Although she was always the focus of the crowd's attention, she always seemed absent-minded. Juliette thought to herself, how boring. Today's banquet is really boring. They are all hypocritical and childish people. Their hypocritical noble etiquette can't hide their arrogance and rudeness at all. I hate the way these people look at me. Their pale faces and weak steps betray their bodies that have been hollowed out by beauty. God knows if they secretly implemented the damned first night rites on the civilian girls in their territory. None of them are good people. Chapter 11-12. Beautiful Juliet, you don't look very happy. Isn't today a wonderful day? Count Paris appeared in front of Juliet with a glass of wine in his hand. He looked like a well-mannered young nobleman with a tall and slender figure. His exquisite, luxurious clothes were lined with gold, and every inch of his clothes showed his noble status. The smile on his face was like a spring breeze, but if someone magnified his expression 10 times and slowed it down 100 times, they would be able to see the pride and desire hidden in the depths of his eyes. The actor who played the role of Count Paris did not know how perfect his performance was today. Perhaps only when he looked back at the recording would he truly realize how perfect his performance was today. Count Paris was a junior of Prince Aeschylus, the king of Verona. He had a noble status, and he was Juliet's newly engaged fiancé. Tonight's dance party was held to celebrate Juliet's engagement with Count Paris, and many nobles in Verona were invited. Of course, the Capulet family's mortal enemy, the Montague family, was an exception. However, Juliet did not like Count Paris at all. She even felt that he was the most hypocritical person she had ever met. She had heard many bad rumors about Count Paris, but she did not have any say in her marriage. It's nothing, Count Paris. I'm just a little tired. Oh, my dear Juliet, I'm already your fiancé. You should call me by my name. I'm not used to this suddenly. Count Paris, someone seems to be calling you over there. Okay, I'll go and greet them. After finally sending Count Paris away, Juliet had a short moment of peace. Do I really have to spend the rest of my life with such a man? How pitiful. Just as Juliet was thinking about this, two young men wearing masks suddenly burst into the banquet hall. The two seemed a little frivolous and impetuous, but their clothes were also in line with noble etiquette. She did not know which family they were from. However, this was not important. They were unimportant people, Juliet thought. Romeo and his friend wandered aimlessly through the crowd, whispering to each other. Romeo, forget about Rose Allen. Look at all the lively and cute girls in this banquet hall. Every one of them suits you better than Rose Allen. Romeo's friend advised him. Impossible. You have no idea how perfect Rose Allen is. She was so kind and beautiful. All right, but she's not interested in you. You're the heir of the Montague family. Why waste your precious life on someone who doesn't even like you? Romeo, played by Qin Guang, was whispering to his friend Benvolio. Of course, with the help of the hidden microphone, the TV, computer, and the live audience could hear their whispers clearly. Only the other actors on the stage were in the dark. If there were still people who could maintain their rationality, they would be amazed at the performance of the other actors. It was impossible not to hear Romeo and his friend chatting, but they did not show any flaws on the stage. Their performance was perfect and impeccable. In fact, no one knew that the actors on the stage did not even know that they were acting. They also could not hear the whispers of Romeo and Benvolio that everyone else could hear. They were only separated by the edge of the stage, but the stage and the stage were completely separated into two different worlds. On the inside, it was the city of Verona from hundreds of years ago. On the outside, it was the modern world. It was not only the three-dimensional space that was separated, but also time. Finally, as the lights in the banquet hall in the first scene dimmed, Romeo and Juliet reluctantly said goodbye. The two young people who met for the first time quickly fell into the river of love. They almost turned back after every step, and when they waved goodbye, their hearts felt like it was being cut by a knife. It was unknown whether it was Qin Guang and Irma or the real Romeo and Juliet standing on the stage. The two of them vividly portrayed the feeling of missing each other to the point that they couldn't breathe even though they were facing each other. When the stage fell into complete darkness, the TV, computer, live audience, and the Oscar judges suddenly woke up. The first scene was over? What just happened? No, nothing happened just now. We only watched the first scene of Romeo and Juliet, but why did it feel like our time was stolen? Looking around the world, there were about 100 million people watching this scene at the same time. Almost all of them took a deep breath, and the same thought appeared in their minds. Were we watching a stage play just now? But I clearly felt like I had returned to medieval Italy, and I even stood in the banquet hall where Romeo and Juliet met. It seemed like we had also become a part of this play. Maybe we were a bystander, or maybe we were an insignificant character in the banquet hall, or maybe we were just a fairy floating in the air and an invisible god, watching this pair of doomed acquaintances. Everyone's personality and life experience were different, and everyone had a different sense of existence when watching this stage play. For example, professional actors like Big Beard Dang and Jean Jiang, or Liz, or William Jones and Bent Affluent who were hiding in the crowd under the stage, what appeared in their minds was an entire stage, an entire world. They were the incarnations of invisible gods. They could see the existence of this world as if it was within their reach, but they had forgotten their own reality. Four ordinary art lovers, what appeared in their minds was the scene in front of them, and they became bystanders who had no sense of existence but still stood on the stage. Even the flickering candlelight would leave an imprint in their eyes and minds. As for ordinary people, they even had feelings of resistance at first. After all, the stage play was relatively small, and the performance was Romeo and Juliet, that they had heard so many times before. At first, they thought this was a boring program that would make people sleepy. But in the end, they did not change the channel. Instead, they unconsciously followed their emotions and the people in the play into the play. But what was particularly strange was that even though everyone knew that these two people were destined to end tragically, they did not realize this at all. They forgot time, forgot the story, forgot the ending, and forgot the inevitable tragedy in the fate of these two young people. Now, when the first act finally ended, they suddenly came to a realization, and their minds began to recall the countless details on the stage just now. Those who knew performing arts, such as Liz who was far away in London, and President Fred who was sitting under the stage, were all terrified when they thought about it. They did not understand why, and even more did not understand how Romeo did it. It was as if the moment Romeo appeared on the stage play had completely sublimated. Every actor on the stage became full of spirituality. Every little gesture, every expression, every line, and tone of voice became impeccable. What was even more difficult to understand was that even the stage scenery and props became more real. No, even the virtual background played on the digital screen, now that they thought about it, was directly playing the background of the musical version of Paris, France in the year 2000. But just a minute ago they clearly saw the infinitely real scene with the naked eye. What the hell is going on? Are our consciousnesses confused? Or are we really pulled into the world of the play? Chen Guang's world-class acting, the more knowledgeable people were, the deeper they fell into it. Whether it was the live audience or the live broadcast audience in front of the TV, they all fell into it. As for those who did not understand, they could only say that they did not understand, but they could only say that they did not understand. Although they did not know how to describe it, in any case it was very amazing. Anyway, at that time they could not remember anything. But one thing was for sure, before Romeo appeared on the stage, everything on the stage looked very sloppy, even rough. But as soon as he appeared on the stage, everything in the play seemed to come to life, and everything in the play seemed to have a fresh life. So, the one who brought this change could only be that Romeo. Who the hell was he? Why had they never heard of such a great actor in the Princeton drama troupe before? This kind of character should have been famous long ago, but no one had any impression of him. After giving everyone a 5-minute break, accompanied by Romeo hiding in the corner of the garden of Capulet's garden and Juliet calling from the balcony, the second act of Chen Guang's version of Romeo and Juliet began. In fact, today's script of Romeo and Juliet was a little different from the past. There were many temporary adjustments and compression. There were also some changes to the main dialogue, slightly different from the original classic, and the narrative structure was not the commonly used flashback technique in the previous stage plays. The story did not start from the graves of Romeo and Juliet next to each other, nor did it directly skip the foreshadowing and the story background. Instead, it directly started from Romeo arriving at Capulet's house and seeing Juliet for the first time. As for the previous story, the background of the story about Romeo and another girl, Rose Allen, was simply explained through the dialogue between Romeo and his friend Benvolio, supplemented by a simple narration. This was a play that everyone was familiar with. In order to be able to finish in more than 2 hours, the director made a very simple and crude adaptation of the script. Although every line in Shakespeare's original version was classic, and every detail was very important, the fundamental purpose of today's Romeo and Juliet was to show off Chen Guang's acting skills. So when old James called Captain Gold last night, he emphasized that only the core parts related to Romeo would be retained, and the rest would be reflected in a simple narration. They had to use the shortest time, the least number of scenes, and tell the whole story from Romeo's point of view. As a professional drama leader, Gold Cameron was actually quite distressed by such an adaptation. Originally, in order to make a good play, manpower and material resources needed to work together. But with such a change in the script, the story was simplified and compressed to the extreme. To put it nicely, it was called an adaptation, but to put it bluntly, it was called destroying a classic. It was extremely difficult to achieve the desired effect. There were only 2 ways to save such a lousy script. Either poke the eyes of the audience blind, or hope that Romeo could really support the whole play by himself. But the latter was impossible. There was no such actor in the world. If this was just an inconspicuous stage play, it would not matter even if it was messed up. But then it became the focus of the world, which made Captain Gold panic. But now that the first act was over, leader Jean Tay immediately calmed down. Although he did not know where this Mr. Blake came from or who he was, it did not matter at all. He was simply a living god. The performance on the stage continued. The audience who had not yet digested the story of the first act were instantly pulled into a new story. They could not resist the attraction of the play at all. It was simply a magical whirlpool. Even in China, the old man who had never watched a European stage play and only liked to listen to Western clappers, had accidentally clicked on the drama channel when he wanted to watch the morning news. He had only accidentally glanced at the TV in the process of quickly changing the channel, and then he couldn't move his eyes away. Even those who did not understand English could see the subtitles in their eyes, but did not know that they were looking at the subtitles. When the actors in the play began to speak, they would subconsciously link the subtitles with the actors' lines seamlessly. This kind of stage play could even cross the barriers of language and skin color, time and space, and break through the barriers of interests and hobbies to completely pull the audience in. Chen Guang's domineering acting field did not only cover the 300 acres of land in Eaton Manor, but also completely swept through every inch of the world through the technology of modern live streaming and TV broadcast. When Prince Aeschylus read the last line in an impassioned yet sorrowful voice, the spotlight on the stage finally fell into complete darkness. This Romeo and Juliet, that belonged only to Chen Guang, finally came to an end. At that moment, the entire Eaton Manor was silent. Not a single person stood up and applauded. Gradually, the first sob was heard as if the first fire had been lit on the dry grassland. Sobs came from all directions. Even the senior members of the Oscar committee, even though they had seen Romeo and Juliet no less than 10 times, could not hide the pain in their hearts. They could not control their emotions at all. Not only the live audience but the countless viewers around the world in front of their TV and computers were not any better. The tragedy affected the emotions of every audience. Sobs echoed in almost every corner of the world. If the earth had feelings, it would probably be crying softly at that moment. Qin Guang stood quietly backstage. At that moment he had already left the state of international performing arts, but the others backstage were also crying bitterly. The aura of a martial sage told Qin Guang that at that moment, the whole world was crying because of the tragedy he had just performed. Chapter 11-13. The long silence and sobbing lasted for at least 10 minutes before the pitch-black stage finally quietened down. Apart from that, the minds of the audience below the stage and in front of their televisions and computers seemed to have fallen into a world of ice and fire. Half of them were still reminiscing about the tragic fate of Romeo and Juliet, while the other half were desperately thinking about a question. They had a vague impression of the actress who played Juliet. It was a young actress named Emma Watson, but who was Romeo? Who was the young man who brought the stage play from mediocrity to shock the world? It was as if he had opened a window to another world for everyone in the past 2 hours. It was as if he was a ray of light that shone from the sky of Verona hundreds of years ago into the modern society. Who was he? Even now, when the audience looked at the people around them or chatted with others, they could not help but subconsciously imitate the tone and intonation of the actors in the play. Who was this Romeo? What kind of performance art was he using? Some people who had watched Women and World's Faction had already associated Romeo with the Chinese, Qin Guang, but they could not be sure. On the stage, Romeo didn't look like a Chinese at all. His accent was so perfect that people couldn't associate him with a Chinese at all. Most importantly, when these people were watching the play, they didn't have the time to figure out who was playing who. All their thoughts were emptied. Even though the play had ended, even though they had begun to guess Romeo's identity, they were still blinded by the fact that the two were the same person. Old James and the other 29 members of the World Party's underground organization silently wiped away their tears and looked up at the bright moon in the sky. They thought to themselves that they were right about Donald. That despicable Donald had led everyone into the ditch. King Cameron tried his best to hide the excitement in his heart. If Mr. Blake did not look so noble and elegant in the crowd, King Cameron would have rushed up and hugged him tightly. "Irma, all right, let go of me." Qin Guang gently patted Juliet's back. Ever since the performance ended, this girl had been hugging him uncontrollably. Emma Watson snapped out of her daze and released her grip on Qin Guang's back. She took a step back and said, "I'm sorry, Romeo. I couldn't control myself." Qin Guang smiled. "I'm not Romeo or Irma. The show is over. We're actors." Following Qin Guang's explanation, the other actors who had also woken up pricked up their ears. Everyone wanted to know who this Mr. Black was. They racked their brains, but they couldn't think of a perfect actor named Blake in the world before. They all knew that this was an alias, so who exactly was he? Which performing arts school did he graduate from? Or was he the descendant of some great master? Could it be that he was really the descendant of the Montague family from Verona that Philip's assistant had mentioned? Irma immediately realized that although Qin Guang's accent was different from before, the timbre was his original voice. Irma woke up with a start. Oh my God, why did it take me so long to realize? But Irma quickly realized that she had been too immersed in her character. During the performance, she didn't have the energy to think about who the other party was. All she knew was that she was completely immersed in the world of Romeo and Juliet. "Dear?" Irma wanted to call out Qin Guang's name. But Qin Guang immediately stopped her. "Irma, don't be anxious. We haven't finished what we have to do. We should go on stage and thank the audience." Irma didn't understand Qin Guang's intentions, but she wouldn't question his decision. She just replied blankly, "Okay." Qin Guang turned around and greeted King Cameron. King Cameron came back to his senses and hurriedly asked the others to tidy up and get ready to go on stage. "Mr. Cameron, there's something I need to trouble you with." "Okay, Mr. Blake, go ahead." "I need a piano. I want to play a song as a gift for today's curtain call." "Okay, right away. I'll get someone to prepare it." King Cameron immediately turned around to make arrangements. "Mr. Watson, who is Romeo? Who is this Romeo?" President Fred turned around and asked old James, unable to control himself. Old James pretended to be a fool. I'm not sure, President Fred. Who do you think it is? Who in this world can have such acting skills? In fact, old James was already hinting at it, but Fred didn't realize it. Malfoy Bentler, who was next to him, also frowned. I've never heard of such a talented actor in the Princeton Repertory Theater. Just a genius? Daimon said sarcastically. Malfoy opened his mouth to argue, but after a while, he couldn't say a word. Okay, I admit that if we put aside his identity as a young man, then he's a well-deserved master. Old Foreman, who was next to him, didn't try to hide it anymore. Just a master? Okay, this is a great artist who truly founded a school. I don't understand how he did it, but obviously before and after he went on stage, the other actors on stage and us, the audience, didn't think the same thing. What he brought to us might be another level of performing arts. Seeing that Malfoy was speechless, Fred rushed to say. But still no one knew who was playing Romeo. Old James and the others who knew the inside story held it in. They were waiting for the moment when Qin Guang would reveal the mystery himself. They really couldn't be bothered to explain to Fred and the others. In fact, if they had watched Women or World's Pie before, they could completely associate the actor who played Romeo with Qin Guang. Because other than the same person, no one else could do what he did. In order to maximize the effect of tonight's performance, Qin Guang did everything he could. The more people wanted to know the answer, the more he hid it. Perhaps many TV stations that had been forcefully delayed hated him to death. Now that he did not end the live broadcast, whether it was UBC or other TV stations with secondary authorization, they would not change the program. He suppressed the emotions of all the audience, and then he would reveal the answer after he finished playing this song. Qin Guang had had enough of the slow scheming with the stubborn old fools of the Oscars. The 2-year deadline was getting closer and closer. Every day he wasted would mean a smaller chance of survival. If possible, he even wanted to let the dust settle tonight. Although it was very difficult, he worked hard in this direction. Everything he did was to increase his chances of success, even if it was just the slightest. If I were a singer, the audience would be the ordinary judges, and the stubborn old fools of the Oscars would be the guest judges. Then, I really want to use 1900 Wavy Etude to make the whole world turn around for me. This is a classic that has never appeared in the world. It could even be said that in the world of Pianist on the Sea, 1900's talent and composition was fully embodied, but it had never appeared in the movie, let alone in reality. It was 1900 sitting alone in the hall on a stormy night. He seemed to be playing it casually, but in fact he was playing an extremely exquisite piece of music. It was the embodiment of 1900's talent in the world that only belonged to him. Everyone, please listen to 1900 Wavy Etude. Qin Guang said in a very calm tone, and then his fingers moved. Chapter 11-14. Brosnan and Malfoy, two famous musicians, were at a loss. 1900 Wave Etude? What's that? Have you heard of it, Brosnan? No, I've never heard of it. Malfoy was at a loss. Is it because we're too ignorant? On such an occasion, under the eyes of the whole world, if he really wanted to express his gratitude, shouldn't he play a famous song that everyone was familiar with? But why haven't we heard of it? Brosnan's feeling became more and more obvious. Extraordinary people always do extraordinary things. We're not in a good enough state to understand. Although it was hard to understand, Brosnan was suddenly sure of one thing after less than 5 seconds of Qin Guang's fingers running over the keys. That's right, this Blake is that Blake. Malfoy, I'm sure that Blake, who plays Romeo, is the blind man who conquered all of us the day before yesterday. I suspected that he was too good at pretending to be blind that day, but if he has such acting skills, then it's not surprising. The song he's playing now should be an original piece inspired by The Pianist on the Sea. He has the ability. If it weren't for the fact that he has so few works, I would even compare him to Tchaikovsky. Hearing that, Malfoy Bentler fell silent, which was rare for him. As proud and arrogant as he was, he had never been so thoroughly convinced by someone. However, he couldn't find any reason to doubt Blake. If both Blake were equally black, Malfoy Bentler could only admire him from the bottom of his heart. His acting skills, which were so perfect that they transcended time and space, and his amazing performance in Brosnan's cafe the day before yesterday, these two incredible talents were so favored by God to be combined in one person. Everyone had adapted the same song, and he had even combined the efforts of dozens of people from Bentler's studio and Brosnan's music academy, but he had completely lost to this guy named Blake. The difference between the two was not just a little bit, but the difference between the light of a grain of rice and the brilliance of the sun and the moon. Just as Malfoy Bentler was feeling indignant yet submissive, Qin Guang's performance finally skipped the simple warm-up and cut to the chase. The notes that were like a torrential storm assaulted one's face. It was so sudden that it didn't give anyone any time to prepare themselves mentally. A second ago, it was as tranquil and soothing as the blue Danube River, but in the next moment, it had become an oncoming sea. The waves were turbulent and the waves soared into the sky. At a glance, one could not see the end, only the endless rise and fall of the deep sea. The storm came head-on. Although they could only hear the sound of the zither in their ears and look up at the bright moon and sparse stars in the sky, they felt as if they could feel the dripping of water on their faces. They could even smell the dampness of the sea. The most terrifying illusion in the world was knowing that it was an illusion, but being powerless to resist it. It was the same with the Romeo and Juliet, just now, and it was the same with the wavy Etude 1900 now. It might have been better for others, but for people like Brosnan and Malfoy Bentler, it was a great torment, but it was also a great happiness. Because the two of them had life experience, they understood movies and they understood music. As a result, they were deeply immersed in the play, and the feelings they felt when they listened to the zither music became even deeper. 10 minutes ago, they were still deeply immersed in the sad story of the young couple, and their hearts ached so much that they couldn't breathe. 10 minutes later, they were dragged into the waves of the sea by a barbaric and domineering force. All of this happened so suddenly, and it was tough and fierce. What they heard in their ears was music, but the musical notes formed one after another seemingly substantial picture. Through the zither music, they seemed to feel the incomparably broad mind of the performer and composer. This kind of mind was enough to support the purest art, and an even purer life. Just like 1900, who was born in the sea and died in the sea, he came to this world with a pure life, but only left behind a purer life. He was like a white steed that flashed past a crack, and he didn't even have a real name. But even so, it couldn't be denied that in the world that belonged to him as outlined in the movie, he was worthy of the word great. People vaguely understood the true meaning of Blake's 1900 wave-breaker etude. It was called an etude, but it practiced the true meaning of life, and the courage to brave the wind and waves. The listener seemed to incarnate 1900, sitting on this small boat of fate, sailing against the wind under the huge waves of life, and sailing far away. People like Old James and others, or Big Beard Deng and others who knew Blake's true identity, could also feel a little bit of Qin Guang's true feelings from this arrogant zither music. Why was he always so arrogant? Why was he always unwilling to bow his head to anyone who doubted him? Even if it was a temporary compromise, he would never do it. The reason was very simple. Just like what he expressed in this etude, he was very clear that his ability was worthy of respect. This was a performance of confidence, and his confidence was well-founded. In fact, he was not arrogant and rude, but when a person's talent reached a certain level, he would accurately judge his own ability. He denied and ridiculed people, but what he recognized was his own talent. What he truly respected was art as well as achievements. He bowed his head to others and compromised, which was equivalent to denying himself. But once a person like him denied himself, it was equivalent to him belittling his own talent and achievement. Perhaps it would affect the state of mind that he had to reach or even surpass the peak in a certain field. Only a genius who was endlessly focused could be like him in every field that he set foot in, unprecedented and unparalleled. The reason why he could conquer every field that he wanted to conquer was because he had such a perfect and confident heart. He was a very complicated person. Those who had interacted with Qin Guang many times knew that although he was not refined and courteous, he definitely respected the old and loved the young. In the beginning, he had such a strong opinion of the Oscar committee, and his relationship with them was so strained. But after Irma pulled some strings, he did not show any arrogance when he saw old James, but instead he politely called him Mr. Watson. Another example was the time when he was targeted by the big shots in the North American film industry at the premiere of Women. If it wasn't for the divine weapon that fell from the sky, his premiere would have been completely ruined. But so far he had never spoken ill of anyone in public. Although William Jones and Ben Affleck each accused Qin Guang of being rude on their social media, those who knew Qin Guang knew that it must have been those two guys who provoked him, which was why he had mercilessly slapped them in the face. All these signs showed that the real-life Qin Guang was not like ordinary celebrities who pretended to be approachable and not forget their original intentions despite being in a high position. Whether he was rich or poor, he really did not change. To achieve this was easy to say but extremely difficult to do. Only the true detachment from his bones could support his personality of not blaming others when he was lonely, and not being arrogant when he was glorious. But when it came to his professional field, well, even though he had a lot of professional fields, let's call it Qin Guang's field for now. In short, when it came to matters involving Qin Guang's field, he changed from a good boy who respected the old and loved the young to a madman who despised the authority of the world. In the past, Jin Shirui and Jiang Yage thought that Qin Guang was quite schizophrenic, and sometimes they even wondered if they should find him a psychiatrist. But right now, this wavy Etude 1900, which everyone thought to be Qin Guang's original work, made many people feel that they didn't understand him or that they didn't fully understand him gradually feel that they understood him. If Qin Guang, who was playing the piano and pretending to be pretentious, knew that his behavior today had left such an impression on people, he would probably laugh his head off. You really think too highly of me, my friends, you really detoxify me. I don't need such a state of mind, I'm basically a master who was forced to learn all kinds of things through force feeding. That's right, I'm actually schizophrenic. But I don't want to see a psychiatrist, it's such a waste of money. Finally, the sound of the piano continued, gradually turning from rapid to slow, and people's hearts that were tightly gripped slowly calmed down. People looked back, and in this dark night, they seemed to see a window on the side of the ship. A ray of warm sunlight after the wind and rain shone through the window into the cabin of the ship, which was filled with countless floating dust. People's eyes were filled with the golden radiance of the sun, and countless dust spirits were jumping in the light. The imaginary scene in the minds of the listeners was like the song of the spirits coming from a quiet 1,000-year-old forest, which could make people's hearts become more peaceful and peaceful. After the sound of the piano stopped, whether it was in front of the stage or in front of the TV around the world, it seemed to be quiet for a whole minute, and then there was a deafening applause. Standing up from his chair, Qin Guang faced the stage. He faced the legal footage of UBC and YouTube, as well as the infringing footage of Twitch and ABC. However, he was not interested in pursuing these people's infringement. Instead, he deliberately waved in the direction of these infringers and nodded slightly. Qin Guang's encouragement gave these infringers a shot in the arm. Now everyone could guess that this Romeo and Juliet was specially prepared by the Princeton drama troupe for Mr. Black. Even Kinte Cameron was taking the risk of losing everything. So, even though everyone was signing a contract with the Princeton Repertory Company, Mr. Blake was the one who had the final say. As long as he agreed, then they could shoot with confidence. Qin Guang held the microphone in his hand and was not in a hurry to speak. Instead, he looked forward with eyes as deep as the sea. Chapter 11:15. The sea of people formed by the audience stretched from the stage to the Castle Villa building dozens of meters away, spreading out in a fan shape. Sitting at the front were the 100 or so members of the Oscar committee. Qin Guang nodded to old James and the others in the crowd, whose eyes were shining. The crowd spread out on both sides. Many of them were celebrities from all walks of life that he had met in Brosnan's cafe that day. Qin Guang even saw Bravo and Waltzman, the two big bosses of Prince's laboratory, in the crowd. Oh, and the heads of other scientific research institutions who have been arguing with Zhuo Jingxi recently. Other people, counting from here to the distance, were densely packed. Unknowingly, the place had been filled with nearly 20,000 people. Qin Guang glanced at the various cameras again. He thought to himself, there should be about 200 million viewers around the world right now, right? Then this means that on average, one person in every 30 people in the world is watching the live broadcast of his stage play. According to the principle of word of mouth, as long as today is over, then the whole world will be shocked by his talent, especially his talent in acting. I only have one goal, and that is to make everyone who wants to watch movies or TV surrender from the bottom of their hearts and recognize that I, Qin Guang, am the strongest performing artist in the history of mankind. Thank you everyone. Thank you everyone. Thank you. Qin Guang finally spoke. He was full of energy and his pronunciation was perfect. This sentence was said in English, and it was a very pleasant, noble and elegant medieval aristocratic accent. Across the ocean, Jin Shirui and Jiang Yage clenched their fists tightly, looking very nervous. Sister Shirui, what are you nervous about? Yage, I'm nervous about what you're nervous about. I think he's going to start showing off. He's happy. Oh my God, where did you learn such rude words? You can't blame me. Didn't he read online novels from time to time some time ago? I also read his book and accidentally learned it. But this word is very suitable to describe him now. Aren't you the same? No, I'm just thinking that once he reveals his identity, the Oscar will be in the bag. I'm happy for him. Old James and the other members of the World Party held their breath. They knew that the real master, who had been neglected and prejudiced recently because of his skin color and personality, was about to reveal his true face to the world. When that time came, he really wanted to see how Fred and the others would react. I'll definitely go to Donald's house and drink all the wine he's hiding. This is his punishment. Madame Joshtam had brought back a copy of World Faction early in the morning. No wonder Donald had been hiding and refused to leave the house. He must have been studying it wholeheartedly. Previously, everyone was worried about his safety and repeatedly called him, but he was always secretive and refused to confess. He was clearly selfish. He must have decided to run naked because he sincerely recognized Qin Guang's artistic achievements and felt guilty. If you had told us earlier, we wouldn't have treated such a great artist like that. Do you want us to become negative examples in the history of art? We've been ruined by you. As for those who didn't know Blake's true identity, the doubts that had been hidden in their hearts were getting stronger. Who was this Mr. Blake who was like a gift from God to mankind? On the other end, Qin Guang finally spoke again. I know that many of you have all kinds of guesses about my identity. That's right, I'm not Blake. This is just an alias that I came up with. Everyone listened attentively. He was finally going to reveal the answer. On the stage, Qin Guang grinned before he took a deep breath and spoke in a different language. Let's not talk about this matter anymore, Qin Guang said. Thank you all. My friends from China, remember to like and follow me. Double-click 666. Big Beard Deng, who was overwhelmed with emotions, was forcing himself to drink water to suppress his shock. When he heard that, he spat a mouthful of tea onto Yang Shi's face. Jiang Yage fell to the ground. I knew he could speak Chinese, but your northeastern accent is too abrupt. Jean Shuiwei covered her mouth and laughed. Isn't that his style? When the Wuxia people heard the standard northeastern dialect, how could they not know that this golden-haired young man was one of them? They cheered. On the other hand, the European and American audiences were bewildered. What? What does that mean? Is that Chinese? Can someone translate it for me? Mr. Johnson, I've learned a little bit. Booker, go ahead. The first sentence is to thank you all, 3 grams of oil. The second sentence is, old iron block from China? What? Old iron block? What does that mean? It's probably an old antique that shows respect and gratitude to others. The second sentence is to ask people to like it. Yes, like it, then follow him. Just like how we follow Taylor Swift's Twitter. The last sentence is to ask people to hit 6. Hit 6 in a row. Poor Mr. Johnson. He had no idea what his secretary Booker had translated. Maybe even Booker himself didn't know. But on the stage, Qin Guang suddenly turned around and took a towel from Elma Watson. The towel was soaked in makeup remover. He had to perform a big face change and turn Blake into right chin in a second. The silicone prosthesis on his nose bridge was a little tight. It would take at least half an hour to remove his makeup. But it didn't matter. The skin of the Earth Sauce Bomber was very durable. His makeup removal was a skill. Force could create miracles. Under the dazed gaze of countless people, Qin Guang smiled and slowly covered his face with the towel. Swoosh. Qin Guang's face on the cover of World School of Performing Arts and the poster of Women had suddenly appeared in front of everyone in an extremely sudden manner. Under the night sky, his blonde hair fluttered in the wind. His smile was so special. Below the stage there was a lot of wailing. The first to bear the brunt was not President Fred, but William Jones, who was hiding in the crowd, Qin Guang's best competitor for the Oscars. Oh, God. My God. What? Why is it him? William Jones held his head in his hands and screamed. He couldn't control his emotions at all. On the other side, Ben Affleck wasn't much better than William. At this time, the lead of July, a 3-time Oscar nominee for Best Actor, and a double winner of the Berlin Film Festival and the Paris Film Festival, was slowly squatting on the ground with a red face. He was so ashamed and angry that he wanted to find a hole to hide in. At this time, his mind was full of the first time he met the Chinese, Qin Guang, and the mockery he had made at Qin Guang in the coffee shop next to the handprint wall square outside the Wuxia Theater. Every mockery he had given to Qin Guang had now become a knife in Ben Affleck's hand that stabbed into his heart. How stupid and ignorant must I be to say something like that to him? Brosnan also stood up, shouting hysterically like a madman. I knew it was him. I knew Blake was Blake and Blake was right. The god of piano. The god of performing arts. Chapter 11:16. Brosnan's roar woke up the celebrities in the crowd who loved jazz and performing arts. They had seen Blind Blake the day before yesterday. There was an uproar, and these people were even more excited than the ordinary audience. Blind Blake, Romeo Blake, Qin Guang, the male lead of Women, and the world's best microsculptor, the world's best linguist, the world's best. Okay, this guy has a lot of titles that can be called the world's #1. 2 days ago he even made world-renowned research institutions like Prince Laboratory and Alamo Laboratory bow to him in some high-tech field. But that was not important. What was important was that all these complicated identities and abilities had been integrated into one person's body. People simply could not understand how a person could be like this Wuxia man, Qin Guang, and contain so many abilities in one body. What was the structure of his head? What was his body made of? Was his energy limitless? Was the capacity of his brain limitless? Or was it because he had countless completely split personalities and souls living in the same head? Was every personality in his body a stubborn genius? That was the only explanation. Although it was still inconceivable, it was easier to accept than before. Geniuses were always different from ordinary people. If a genius became a Wuxia man like Qin Guang, it would not be strange even if he had 3 eyes. President Fred's expression was so complicated in the darkness that he had to cover his face awkwardly. There seemed to be some relief in his eyes. Maybe he had already guessed this. But he felt a little awkward. He really did not want to admit that an Asian man could crush the entire European and American film and television industry in this way in the performing arts. He felt that the public boycott of Qin Guang by the American Film Association, which he had led in the past, might really be a sad joke. In the past, there had been Wuxia people who were respected in the European and American entertainment circles, but most of them had earned their fame with their fists like Bruce Lee. People respected them more because they had promoted Chinese kung fu to the world. Even Ang Lee, who had won an Oscar for Best Director, couldn't do what Romeo did on stage today. He was so domineering that it only took him 2 hours to get rid of all the controversies about his acting. As a result, they could now be said to be the most picky group of people in the world when it came to movies. The senior members of the Oscar committee racked their brains to find fault, but they couldn't. President Fred turned to look at old James beside him. "Mr. Watson, you prepared this, right?" Now that things had come to this, old James could no longer be secretive. He and old Foreman nodded in unison. "Yes, this was indeed arranged by us old men. Fred, do you want to ask us why?" President Fred was silent for a few seconds. He looked at the stage with a complicated expression and shook his head. "No need to ask. I know the answer. Tell me, what do you think?" President Fred sighed and said, "We were wrong. We were wrong before. We shouldn't have judged the Chinese. No matter how good our reasons for boycotting him were, we were wrong. Besides, we shouldn't have given up our principles as filmmakers just because we boycotted him. We should at least watch his movies in private and read his books." Old James nodded and patted President Fred on the shoulder. "Fred, I'm glad that you've realized this. It's not too late. Remember, although the art of film is not as pure as it used to be, we will always be interfered with from all sides. But no matter what the outside world thinks, as filmmakers, especially you, as the president of the American Film Association and the chairman of the Oscar Committee, you can't learn from others and go with the flow. You should look at problems with a more proactive and dialectical perspective. You must have your own principles and perseverance. When you encounter something, you have to use your brain and think about it. If Women was really just Qin Guang's boastful reputation, their box office would have collapsed a long time ago. This is a movie from China. Even the English dub version was only released yesterday, but the box office of this movie has already become phenomenal. There must be a reason for this. Besides, as far as I know, even though the English version has been released, the Chinese version of Women's box office is still much higher than the dub version. This can only be because Qin Guang's acting skills are comprehensive and three-dimensional. His expressions, eyes, body language, and even his lines and accent make up his unique world-class acting skills. Just like performing arts are magical arts. They can infect people. We all say that if a performance can make people immerse themselves in the scene and feel the same way, then it's a great performance. However, Qin Guang is different. He has brought out every single detail to the extreme, and through his world-class performance he has pulled the other actors and audience into his world. When we watch his performance, it's not just a simple performance, but it's like we're experiencing someone else's life. This is the highest level of performing arts. Fred was deeply remorseful. The old president is right. Old James nodded with great satisfaction and stopped lecturing Fred. He wouldn't admit that he was actually no different from Fred before. If Irma hadn't kidnapped him, an old stubborn man like him would only be more difficult to deal with than Fred and Malfoy. Fortunately, old James finally stood in front of Qin Guang with the help of his sensible granddaughter and came to his senses in time. Now, of course, he could righteously put on the posture of an old senior and preach to his successor, Fred. The 29 members of the World Party were also doing the same thing as old James. They keep saying the same thing. Young people, lads, don't think that we're useless just because we're old. See, old ginger is spicier after all. On the surface, the reason why we helped Chen Guang make this scene of Romeo and Juliet is to give him a chance to prove his ability in front of the whole world. However, gold would eventually shine, and no one could stop Chen Guang's unprecedented acting skills from gaining the acknowledgement of the world. The only difference was whether it was sooner or later. We're not giving Chen Guang a chance, we're giving all the members of the Oscar committee a chance. Our real goal is to make you, the backbone of the Oscar committee, who have been selectively blinded by your own choices, re-examine this matter. The judges of this year can't be nailed to the pillar of shame in history. We can't let such a sentence be written in the history of art hundreds of years later. Because of arrogance and racial prejudice, the founder of the world's performing arts and one of the greatest performing artists in human history, Chen Guang, missed out on his first Oscar Best Actor award. Fred, who was then the chairman of the committee, and his companions joined forces to create the biggest shady business in the history of the performing arts. If that really happened, how sad would it be? After being reminded by these industry seniors who boasted of their foresight, people like Fred and Malfoy broke out in a cold sweat. Poor Donald Jostein decisively became the scapegoat again. It's all your fault, you selfish bastard. If you had told us earlier that Chen Guang was such a great person, he wouldn't have been in such a precarious situation. Apart from these people, the audiences in front of their computers and televisions all over the world weren't any better. Those who had already gone to the cinema to watch Women felt that everything was as it should be. As for those who had never been to the cinema for various reasons, perhaps because they were boycotted or because they were busy or for some other reason, or because they didn't understand the monograph on World's Pie, their faces were flushed with embarrassment. Those in China who had mocked Chen Guang on the internet for losing face overseas felt like they were struck by lightning. They wondered if they should take a few days of sick leave to hide. Once again, they secretly regretted in their hearts. Why were I so stupid? Why didn't I learn from my mistakes? Damn it, Chen Guang is a pit and he makes me fall into it every time. I'm so angry that I forget the pain every time the scar is healed. Why don't you fail once? Forget it, I'll call the cake shop and order a brownish yellow spiral cake. There are a lot of people who want to eat sh*t now, and I definitely won't be able to make it in time for the hot one. I'll just use a cake with a similar color to top it off. What? The coffee-colored cream is gone? Can't you just buy some Dove powder and sprinkle it? In less than a minute after Chen Guang took off his mask, it could be said to have shocked the world. At the same time, it also brought a lot of business to cake shops all over the world, especially in China. Sensing the cheers coming from below the stage and the gazes of worship from the audience, Chen Guang's heart calmed down. The old man had finally settled this **t incident. The so-called best effect of acting cool was, of course, to let those who thought highly of him and supported him feel proud, and to let those who only wanted to see him make a fool of himself, and wished that he could fall to the bottom of the abyss, feel so much pain that they wished they were dead. This time, who knew how many people were going to live stream themselves eating **t? If this goes on, our country's septic tanks will be emptied, right? Giving another deep bow, Chen Guang continued, in any case, I would like to thank everyone for appreciating my Romeo and Juliet. Thank you to the Princeton Repertory Theater, thank you to Irma Watson, thank you to Mr. James Watson, thank you to all the people in the American Film Association who have supported and helped me, thank you to the crew of Women, thank you to all the employees of Chen Guang Group, thank you. Chapter 11:17. Chen Guang really couldn't remember how many people he had thanked. He simply racked his brain for fear that he would miss out on someone. He had already treated today as his own award ceremony. Also, I have to thank a certain person who has been supporting me from behind. No, it's my goddess. As the saying went, milk is mother. Although Chen Guang and Lu Li seemed to be at loggerheads on the surface, he still had to express his gratitude subtly at such a critical juncture. Recently they had been on bad terms. It would be good to coax her a little. Lastly, I would like to thank my parents. Fang Tianyu tried his best to signal him with his eyes. Chen Guang felt helpless. All right, I still have to thank the country. Fang Tianyu heaved a long sigh of relief. The boss was really knowledgeable. In Yanjin, the old men who woke up early in the morning to watch Beijing opera spat on the ground. This kid is mocking us. The old man in charge of the SARFT system slammed the table angrily. What's wrong with mocking you? Some departments and some people forget their duties when they have more power in their hands. They forget that they should serve the people. They always like to use chicken feathers as arrows and come up with all kinds of censorship methods to collect fees that they shouldn't have, stifling the creativity of artists. The old man in charge of science and technology said sarcastically. The old man from the SRFT slammed the table and stood up. You only know how to spout nonsense. You know nothing. You think I don't know? Wasn't it because Qin Guang wanted to share his photocatalysis research with the Chinese Academy of Sciences? Your buttocks are all crooked. Even if you want to lick him, don't make things difficult for me. Do you really think artistic work is that easy? The old man from the Faculty of Science and Technology continued to speak sarcastically. Yes, I don't know if it's a good idea or not, but why did you stop me when I wanted to send out a notice to all the universities to organize their students to watch the movie? The way I see it, you just can't bear to see others doing well. It turned out that there was a conflict between the two of them. That's easy for you to say. Why do you think I stopped you? Does Qin Guang's movie need you to fake things like this? You don't even need to organize it. Do you believe that all the university students in the country will line up to watch it themselves? I'm doing it for your own good, so as to avoid being gossiped about. Can a layman not meddle in the affairs of a layman? Wait a minute, don't quarrel, it's a big matter. Hey, look over there, there's a white man running onto the stage. Old man Jin's eyes were glued to the screen when he was trying to stop the fight. When he saw the new situation, he immediately shouted. The two old men who were quarreling immediately calmed down and turned to look at the TV. They just happened to see an old man with messy hair running up the stairs. Why is Donald here? Below the stage, old James shouted in surprise. Qin Guang turned around and saw Donald Jostein. He felt a headache coming on. You still have the face to appear in front of me? You don't even know how miserable I've been. Qin Guang clenched his fists tightly. He was measuring Donald's resistance, wondering if he could send him flying with a single punch. Below the stage there was an inexplicable shock. Only old James and a few others knew the truth of the matter. The others had already placed Donald Jostein on the opposite side of Qin Guang. Shouldn't the owner of the Wuxia theater, who was made to run naked by the Great Right, be the enemy of the Wuxia people? What was he doing here on such an occasion? Donald Jostein started waving his arms crazily the moment he ran onto the stage. He shouted, Mr. Qin? I'm sorry? What? The famously stubborn and extreme Mr. Jostein apologized to Qin Guang in public. What was going on? Wasn't he the one running naked? Why was he apologizing? Qin Guang sighed when he saw that. Sigh, this bastard probably knew that he was going to be beaten up. He apologized so quickly. Sigh, forget it. Let bygones be bygones. Qin Guang waved his hand magnanimously. I'm not such a petty person. Fang Qianyu, who was below the stage, and Lu Xiaoyang, who was far away in Los Angeles, thought that their boss was getting more and more shameless. If he wasn't petty, then everyone in the world would be so petty. Please lend me your microphone. I need to explain to everyone. Donald bowed to Qin Guang in embarrassment before turning to borrow the microphone from Irma Watson. Everyone, I just came here from Los Angeles. I'm sorry that I missed Mr. Chen's Romeo and Juliet, but I'm glad that I managed to catch the last bus. I'm here to explain the misunderstanding that I've caused to everyone. My conscience tells me that my pursuit of film art tells me that I can't let Mr. Chen's performance be doubted. I can't let the misunderstanding continue. Mr. Chen from China is the greatest performance artist that I, Donald Jostein, have ever seen in my life. I swear on the honor of the Jostein family. After a short break and catching his breath, the first thing Donald said into the microphone stunned everyone with his mouth agape. Then why did Mr. Jostein run naked in the Chinese theater? Not far away from the stage, the reporter decisively made a professional response and loudly asked this very sharp question. Everyone thought that Donald would at least be embarrassed. After all, he only wore a tie and checkered underwear, which made him look very funny. He had embarrassed himself. However, not only did he not feel embarrassed, he even had a proud smile on his face. I hope that many years later, my story will resound in the history of art along with Mr. Chen's name. Let me tell you an interesting story. 3 minutes later, Donald finished the whole story with an emotional voice. In the beginning he looked down on Qin Guang, to the ridiculous bet he made with Tang Xiao, and when Qin Guang received the support of many famous figures in the industry, he still felt indignant in his heart. He felt that the art of film was being humiliated. Later, with the help of his wife, Jenny Jostein, he finally let go of his prejudice and flipped open the first volume of World School of Performing Arts, with Chen Guang's face on it. Then he was fiercely shocked. He was so shocked by the bold and imaginative new theories in the book that his face turned red with embarrassment. The next day, as the owner of the Chinese theater, he sneaked into his own theater in disguise. He finally felt what it meant to be a real-world school. Yes, I finally understood my lowliness. He finally understood my foolishness. At that time, I finally understood why Chen Guang would bring his women across the ocean to Hollywood. Even though he knew that his actions would bring him endless resistance. He must have known that people like me would be an obstacle in his way. Everything he did was because he couldn't wait to contribute his great achievements to the world. No matter how much resistance there was, he was willing to pay for it himself. What a great feeling. Mr. Chen is such a great person. In order to defend true art, in order to make the light of art even more dazzling, he charged forward like a brave soldier on the battlefield. Compared to his greatness, I was so ridiculous and stupid. I felt so ashamed that I couldn't sleep at night. I just wanted to do something to get rid of the torture in my heart so that I could calm down and continue to study the great world faction. So, I chose to fulfill my promise and ran a lap around the Wuxia theater in my underwear and a tie. Forgive my selfishness. I should have said all this earlier, but I was too addicted to World School. I just wanted to immerse myself in the ocean of World School of Performing Arts. Because of my selfishness and negligence, I brought a lot of trouble to everyone, especially to Mr. Chen. So, here and now, I want to apologize to Mr. Chen and all the filmmakers in the world. I'm sorry? Donna Jostein said. Then he bowed to the camera again. This time, the whole world was silent because of his determination. Chapter 11:18. Chen Guang chuckled. Mr. Jostein, don't be like this. It's not that serious. Jostein's apology was sincere, and he did it in front of the entire world. Most importantly, Donald Jostein was a very honest man. Alright, he was a stubborn man. When he looked down on you, he would ignore you even when you waved a check at him. When he looked up to you, he would even throw away his pride to support you. It was torture to deal with such a person if you could not grasp his weakness. But once it was to his liking, or it could be said that he was subdued by something deep in his heart, he would no longer be secretive like many people who wanted to save face. Instead, he would directly turn from an enemy to a fan. Sensing the gazes of admiration coming from below the stage, Chen Guang couldn't sense any enmity, even with his acute senses. He even unconsciously glanced at William Jones and Ben Affleck, who were hiding in the crowd. These two were his strongest competitors for the Oscars. They used to be so arrogant, but now, when they accidentally made eye contact with him, they turned their heads away in shame with apologetic looks in their eyes. Chen Guang could roughly imagine that at this moment, there might be people among the nearly 200 million people in the world who still had doubts about him, but that was no longer important. At least in the hearts of the majority of the audience, his acting skills were undoubtedly the best in the world. However, this was not enough. Performing arts such as movies and even TV series had a wide audience. Few people acted in movies, but at least half of the world's 6 to 7 billion people liked or had watched movies. 200 million people only accounted for 1/15 of the audience. This was far from enough. Including the people who had been conquered by women, Thunderstorm, and the world's faction, the total should not exceed 500 million. The overall proportion was still less than 1/6 of the audience. It was still far from the standard of the heavenly Holy Grail. However, Chen Guang wasn't anxious. With the development of modern information technology, his movie was still being screened, and World Faction was still selling well. His feat tonight would continue to spread, and it was easy for people to go along with what others said. In the future, when more people started to acknowledge his acting skills, it would only be a matter of time before he left such an impression in the hearts of the 3 to 4 billion people watching the movie. The Chinese Chen Guang was fully deserving of being the world's best performing artist. In the hearts of those who understood his work, this idea was very strong. In the hearts of those who were merely parroting, this idea might still be doubtful, but at least it would leave an impression. Even if they did not completely approve of this idea, they would not deny it either. At least they knew about this person in this matter. Now, what Chen Guang had done was equivalent to lighting a fire on dry wood and pouring a bucket of oil on it. Even if it rained, it would not be able to stop the fire. At this moment, Chen Guang knew that he had basically succeeded. Donald spoke again. Mr. Chen, I'd like to take this opportunity to officially invite you to leave your handprint on the handprint wall in front of the Wuxia Theater on behalf of the Wuxia Theater. This will be the greatest honor of the Jostein family in the past 100 years of being involved in the film industry. Please allow me to express my sincere apology and unparalleled respect to you with the highest courtesy of the Joshtan family. Indeed, there had been Chinese people who had left their handprints on the handprint wall in the past. However, that was the operation of the market economy. It was not recognized by the mainstream in Europe and America. Because of that, it had caused a lot of controversy. As a result, Donald had not allowed anyone to leave their handprints on the wall for the past 2 years. In fact, Donald had not even attended the handprint ceremony back then. The people who had paid to leave their handprints on the wall were not using the same wall as Master Chaplin and the rest. They had built a new wall later on and did not have any actual status at all. Of course, the people in China would definitely not take the initiative to talk about this. In fact, once it was reported on the internet, they would try their best to suppress it. It had probably been many years since Donald had publicly invited someone to leave their handprint on the handprint wall, let alone in such a respectful tone. Suddenly, a figure rushed up from below the stage. It was Fred, the president of the American Film Association. He took the microphone from Captain Gold and stood beside Qin Guang. Mr. Qin, on behalf of the American Film Association and the Academy Award Committee, I would like to formally invite you to leave your name in the World Film Hall of Fame in Hollywood. In addition, I would like to sincerely invite you to give us a real public lecture. We really want to hear you personally explain your world-class performing arts. As expected of Fred, who was half in the film industry and half in politics. His ability to adapt to the situation was not just for show. Just 2 hours ago he was the most influential person in the world who was boycotting Qin Guang. However, he had now become Qin Guang's most loyal fan. Perhaps it was because he was really moved by the world-class party, or perhaps it was his decision after weighing the pros and cons. However, there was no doubt that Fred's attitude would play a decisive factor. Qin Guang took a deep breath and nodded at both of them. Then he said in a serious tone, "All right. No problem." Hence, under the watchful eyes of almost 200 million people, Donald Joshtan and President Fred, representing 2 different film halls, issued an official invitation to Qin Guang. Qin Guang also accepted the other party's offer of a way out. Actually, based on his temper in the past, even if he had the upper hand, he would not stop until he humiliated the other party to vent his anger. However, things were different now. Qin Guang had become a big shot, and the other party apologized sincerely under the watchful eyes of the public. Moreover, the more obvious their change in attitude was, the more contrasting it would be in the eyes of ordinary people. This would be a great help to Qin Guang's subsequent attempt to become a god of acting. Tonight's 3-hour global live broadcast of the stage play finally came to an end in a joyous atmosphere. Subsequently, reports about Qin Guang's version of Romeo and Juliet spread all over the world like snowflakes. There was also Donald Joshtan's apology and clarification, as well as President Fred's invitation. Of course, there were also all sorts of flattery that involved women and the World Party. Overnight, Qin Guang's name changed from a new actor who had just entered the industry to a world-famous master. They had heard of Qin Guang in the past, and this was akin to having their impression of Qin Guang refreshed. They quickly overlapped the actor Qin Guang with the countless identities he had in the past. Finally, when they realized that they were the same person, their personal image of Qin Guang rose once again. That night, the midnight screening of Women in the United States once again exploded in the box office. It continued to rise against the trend and even surpassed the feat of breaking 10 million people in a single day. The one-day box office reached an incredible US $50 million. In addition, originally, Qin Guang had no plans to release in Europe. Recently, several large European hairstyling companies had been negotiating with the Qin Guang Group in China. They had also besieged Lu Xiaoyang and Fang Tianyu in Los Angeles and Princeton respectively. If it weren't for the strong moral character of the Qin Guang Group, they would have been addicted to the sugar-coated bullets thrown at them. Originally, the negotiations had been going back and forth. Because the price in terms of both parties hadn't reached a completely satisfactory level within the Qin Guang Group, they hadn't been able to come to an agreement. As for Qin Guang's opinion, when Fang Tianyu asked him, this was what he said. "Don't talk to me about these trivial matters. Anyway, I only have one request. We've spent so much money here. Since the European side has taken the initiative to come to us, of course we have to take the money. Most importantly, they have to ensure the transparency of the screening schedule and box office statistics. As for the distribution of the box office, you guys know better than me. Anyway, the more money, the better. The more people watching the film, the better. I don't care about anything else, I only care about the results. Now, after tonight's events, The distribution companies in Europe, Oceania, South America, and even Africa, who refused to make any concessions in the previous negotiations, almost collapsed. Originally, they could still insist on the conditions because they had made up their minds that if they couldn't come to an agreement, they would let the domestic distribution companies unite and not import the film. However, now that Qin Guang's Romeo and Juliet had exploded in the word of mouth, the local audiences who had been waiting for a long time for a blockbuster were unhappy and started to protest. In addition, when the benefits weren't tempting enough, they could unite and not import the film. But now, the potential benefits were enough to move everyone. Almost everyone knew that once a film like Women was introduced, it would be like an old hen that laid golden eggs. The business world was like a battlefield. Who could resist such a temptation? In the end, almost all the distribution companies in all the continents reached an agreement in an instant. They went from working together to not importing the films to working together to import them. Apart from that, they made appropriate concessions in terms of box office revenue, but gave preferential terms in terms of the screening rate, which was enough to move people. That night, matters related to the introduction and distribution of Women in other continents were almost finalized. As for the Asia-Pacific region, everything was handed over to Qianda Pictures, which was one of the investors. In addition, the follow-up development of the audio and video copyright of Qin Guang's version of Romeo and Juliet was also handled by Fang Tianyu and Lu Xiaoyang, who were in the United States. Although the Princeton Drama Troupe was responsible for this matter, and it was led by Old James and the others, all the expenses came from Qin Guang's account. When Qin Guang asked Fang Tianyu to complete the funding, he had already signed the relevant contract for the entire program's copyright. The Princeton Drama Troupe took the money, but the copyright belonged to the Tianguang Group. In addition, that night, Zhuo Jingxi, Hua Ling, and Zhong Yu stayed in the Prince Laboratory Industrial Park under the protection of Auntie Mei. They were busy all night. Fang Tianyu and Lu Xiaoyang were also extremely busy. Only Qin Guang was comfortably lying in the hotel like a deity. 1 minute on stage was 10 years of hard work off stage. Although it only took him a moment to learn acting in the real world, he had suffered a lot in the world of cups. In order to achieve the most perfect performance, Qin Guang was also in a state of desperation. Not only did he drag everyone into the play, but he was also deeply immersed in the play. Although his mind was far more tenacious than ordinary people, he was still a little tired. He slept soundly, and when he opened his eyes, it was already the next day. Chapter 11:19. It was time to leave Princeton. Before leaving, Qin Guang first went to Prince's laboratory. Under the gaze of Bravo and Wurtzman, Qin Guang walked straight into the experimental area that was temporarily allocated to Zhuo Jingxi. Practically all of the most advanced and core equipment in the Prince Laboratory's photocatalysis field was gathered in this region. It was so much so that the Prince Laboratory even took the initiative to purchase equipment and raw materials worth $50 million to meet Qin Guang's requirements. However, Zhuo Jingxi and Qin Guang didn't leave any loopholes for them. The list of raw materials was 5 times the actual variety. This was to confuse the public and prevent technical leaks. In addition, all of the equipment for weighing and sampling were purchased by Zhuo Jingxi. In this area of the laboratory building, 3 other professional agents from the Chinese military carried out a complete transformation. At the same time, the network connection was cut off, cutting off the possibility of Prince's spying. Any equipment that might leave traces of operation had their memory chips purchased by Zhuo Jingxi. Equipment that didn't have a replacement chip was not allowed to be used. In addition, other than Zhuo Jingxi, Hua Ling, and Zhong Yu, no one else was allowed to enter. Even Bravo and Wurtzman belonged to this category of outsiders. In order to achieve a foolproof effect, Qin Guang even borrowed some professional security personnel from the Chinese Academy of Sciences to act as security consultants and staff. They were strictly guarded 24 hours a day. There was only one purpose, which was to blatantly occupy the scientific research resources of Prince's laboratory without leaving any loopholes. After all, in the world's scientific research field, there were too many examples of losses due to leaks. It was important to be wary of others. Bravo and Wurtzman were both angry and helpless when faced with Qin Guang and Zhuo Jingxi's attitude. They felt like Qin Guang was too much. Now that they knew how powerful Qin Guang was, even if they were given a chance and a loophole, they wouldn't dare to pry. The patent rights for the 5 formulas that they published had been officially registered with the assistance of Baker Law Firm, and it was a global patent. Even if he stole Qin Guang's patent, with Qin Guang's current global reputation, and at the same time he did not lack money to fight a lawsuit, so it was impossible for him to try to get involved. Moreover, getting Qin Guang's technical support was more beneficial than stealing these 5 patents. Now that he had offended him, it was hard to guarantee that he wouldn't simply unite all the other companies that still relied on him. Then he would be in an extremely passive position. Wazida and Sanmei, the 2 people who were excluded in advance, might take the risk in desperation, but Prince, who already had a stable income, was absolutely not interested in seeking his own death. "Hey Teacher Zhua, I'm going back to Los Angeles now." Outside the laboratory, Qin Guang looked at Zhuo Jingxi, who was wearing a white coat, through the dust-free glass. Prince had provided the highest-level dust-free laboratory. The conditions were much better than Gokyo University's, but there were still some inconveniences. "Okay, you go ahead and wait for my good news. I'll try to make all of them for you in a month and a half," Zhuo Jingxi said with a smile. Qin Guang was a little annoyed. How could we not kiss each other affectionately? This time he met Teacher Zhuo in Princeton, but he didn't get to drink any soup. He felt so miserable. "I'm a bit reluctant to leave you. How about we don't do anything today? Let's go have a meal to celebrate? I feel like everything has been going well recently." Zhuo Jingxi just smiled and did not say anything. She was not a child anymore. How could she not understand Qin Guang's intentions? "No, this isn't a school and it's not a verification experiment. Today is a very important synthesis step. I can't leave." "Oh, you're a big shot that attracts the attention of the world. Time is precious to you and I really can't leave. Wait until I'm done with the things on hand and complete the conversion of the results of these 5 formulas. Your Tongshan factory will be safe, and your laboratory will be built. When that time comes, you can do whatever you want, okay?" Zhuo Jingxi was soft-hearted. She looked at Qin Guang's eager face and teased him through the glass. Qin Guang sighed in his heart. Time is precious, but isn't a night worth 1,000 gold? Also, how can things be done in this world? There will be a lot of other things to do. He had to achieve his dreams and pursue his career, but he also had to improve his quality of life, right? "Oh yeah, have you thought about the name of your laboratory?" Zhuo Jingxi asked again. Qin Guang was too lazy to think about it. "I don't have time to care about this. I'll decide when the time comes." Teacher Zhuo, come quickly, ignore Qin Guang. On the other side, Hua Ling started to urge him again for some reason. Zhuo Jingxi quickly said goodbye to Qin Guang. "Go do what you need to do, I'll go first. Don't worry about me, we arrange for people to stay in the laboratory every day, it's safe." Qin Guang nodded helplessly, said goodbye to Auntie Mei, who was sitting next to him drinking tea and reading, and left with a bitter smile. Qin Guang boarded the plane alone at 9 o'clock. 9 hours later, around 7 o'clock in the evening, he successfully arrived at LAX. Fang Tianyu did not follow him back. Instead, he was left in Princeton to deal with the aftermath of Luo and Zhu. Qin Guang also asked him to assist Zhuo Jingxi. The handprint wall ceremony was delayed by a day, to tomorrow evening. This way they would have more time to prepare for the ceremony. Donald planned to let Qin Guang leave his name on the first handprint wall, along with Chaplin, Hitchcock, Akira Kurosawa, and other masters who would go down in history. Moreover, Donald even wanted to write such a note under Qin Guang's handprint. The founder of the World School of Performing Arts, the youngest master in the history of film, the great artist who brought the performing arts into a new era. In addition, the members of the Film Association, including President Fred, Malfoy, Old James and others, had flown back to Los Angeles earlier than Qin Guang. They were preparing for the World Film Hall of Fame ceremony the day after tomorrow. At the same time, they had to send out public invitations to invite senior and ordinary members of the Film Association to give a public lecture by Qin Guang in the Film Association's conference hall, which could accommodate 2,000 people. The specific content and video of the lecture would be promoted to all parts of the world in the form of teaching materials under the promotion of the Film Association. If it had been someone else, Fred and the others might have asked them to make sufficient preparations for such a lecture. At the very least, they would have to come up with a complete lesson plan and pass the Film Association's review and approval. However, as for Qin Guang, since everyone had not been very happy with each other previously, and Fred and the others did not even know how to nitpick Qin Guang's theoretical system, they simply cut out the minor details. In short, anything that Qin Guang said about the World School of Performing Arts would definitely be the golden rule. They even seized the time to preview the 2 books of World School of Performing Arts on the plane. However, there was a very awkward situation. Other than the 29 members of the World School of Performing Arts, the others could not buy it on the streets that night. However, Qin Guang did not agree to release a digital version, so the big shots of the Film Association could not buy a copy of the film monograph. It was the biggest joke in the world. In the end, Fred and the others went through a lot of trouble and finally managed to get more than 20 sets before they boarded the plane. However, it was still far from enough for everyone to have a copy. As a result, when they boarded the plane, they had no choice but to squeeze together and read the same book at the same time. This situation only changed after they got off the plane in Los Angeles that afternoon. Perhaps it was through extortion, or perhaps it was through persuasion, but in short, the big shots managed to get their hands on a set. In addition, before Qin Guang got off the plane, they continued to show their prowess. Under Donald's lead, they directly charged into the spare viewing hall of the Wuxia Theater in Hollywood and booked it, or they used the privileges of the association to take the digital source to the small screening hall in Fred's house, or they secretly went to someone's house to watch. Qin Guang returned to the Flemington Hotel and asked Lu Xiaoyang to report to him. "Boss, our total box office in Wuxia has officially exceeded 1 billion yuan, and the North American box office has reached $430 million. Currently, the full distribution contracts for the rest of the Asia-Pacific countries, Europe, Oceania, South America, and Africa have just been signed. The day after tomorrow at the latest, it will be released worldwide." Qin Guang nodded calmly and satisfactorily. "That's good." Buttface was stunned by Qin Guang's calmness. No wonder he was the boss. He could remain calm even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him. If it was someone else who heard such a box office performance, wouldn't they jump 3 feet high? According to the estimates of accounting firms such as PricewaterhouseCoopers and a market research company under Forbes, the global box office of Women is very likely to exceed $2 billion. Qin Guang was still very calm. "Who has the highest box office in history? How much is it?" "It's James Cameron's Avanti, no, Avatar, too. $73 billion. The second place is still Cameron's Titanic, too. $185 billion. Qin Guang sighed. "It's very difficult to be the first in history." Lu Xiaoyang felt lucky that he had been with the boss for some time. If it were someone else, it would be very difficult to resist the urge to beat him up. "Boss, in the past, it was very possible for a movie to be released for a year. Times are different now. Even the best movie will not be released for more than 3 months. $2 billion is already very impressive." Qin Guang shrugged. "Fine. How much can we get?" "The average domestic box office is 40% to 60% and we can get 3.5% of the North American box office. After pulling in all of them, deducting the distribution costs and the share we give to Chenda Pictures, our company's final profit should be around $700 million. Qin Guang's lips curled up slightly, and then he suddenly stopped smiling. "I can't smile. I can't smile. $700 million. I can only get tens of thousands of RMB a month from a female student in a film school. With so much money, if I were to do bad things, how much can I get? Harem of 3,000 beauties? Oh no, I can't control my arm anymore. Damn, maybe I've been holding it in for too long. My mind has been a little open recently." "That's good. What else is going on? Tell me all at once." In North America, the General Edition and Deluxe Edition of World School Performing Arts have been sold out. Now we want to print 5 million more General Editions and 1 million Deluxe Editions, but Chapter 11:20. But why? "Boss, you know that the manufacturing costs in North America are very high and we are in a hurry. Many printing factories have taken the opportunity to demand exorbitant prices. Although our company is not short of money now, we all know how you do things." Qin Guang nodded and snapped his fingers. "That's right, Buttface. You know me well. No matter how much money we have, we can't be fooled." Lu Xiaoyang sighed again. "But the market reaction is too strong. Bookstores all over the United States are crazily sending orders. You know, although the copyright awareness in North America is not bad and it is almost impossible for paper copies to be pirated. But as time goes by and the demand is too strong, we can't guarantee that the scanned electronic files won't spread on the internet, which is likely to affect our profits. We also plan to increase the price of the ordinary edition to $59 and the deluxe edition to $119. In total, there is close to $200 million profit margin in this deal." Qin Guang's mouth twitched and his eyes began to redden. No one would complain of too much money. He also realized something else. Although after last night's battle, he was one step closer to the statue of Best Actor, and there was a faint feeling of budding in his heart. The statue still hadn't appeared. Of course, the sooner the battle was over, the better. It was indeed necessary to solve the problem of the shortage of the world faction as soon as possible. He tried to look calm, but it was very difficult. Then we should increase the print run. But the price of the printers is really high. Qin Guang also sighed. The old man had been in the business for many years and had never suffered losses in silence. Could it be that he had no choice but to admit defeat under the corruption of capitalism? Forget it. How much do they want? Lu Xiaoyang said with a bitter face. We contacted several companies. The average price of the ordinary edition is about $48, and the deluxe edition is about $80, which is twice their actual cost. Qin Guang pounded the table. This is unacceptable. Lu Xiaoyang also felt that this was unacceptable, but he couldn't think of a good solution. Just as he was thinking about this, his cell phone rang. He picked it up and saw that it was Yu Hong calling from China. It was past 9 o'clock in the evening there. He didn't know what Yu Hong was so urgent about. It's old Yu's call. Boss, I'll take it first. It's midnight in China. Lu Xiaoyang explained to Qin Guang and answered the call. What's up, old Yu? To make a long story short, I'm currently discussing something with my boss. On the phone, Yu Hong seemed to want to say something, but in the end he still opened his mouth and said, There's a little situation in the country. Xiao Lu, don't be in a hurry to tell the boss. Qin Guang's ears were sharp and he could hear everything clearly. With the old man's ears, did he even need to turn on the speaker? Yu Hong's sneaky "don't tell the boss" was as loud as thunder. They had rebelled. The team was too big and the people's hearts were scattered. It was not easy to lead the team. Even an honest person like old Yu wanted to hide something from him. This was intolerable. Qin Guang snatched the phone from Lu Xiaoyang. Old Yu, what's up? Why can't you tell me? Boss, did you hear that? Yu Hong was embarrassed. Qin Guang snorted. Of course. My ears are sharp. But old Yu, don't worry. I won't blame you. We're working together and I have 100% trust in all of you. If there's anything wrong with your work, we can talk about it. I'm easy to talk to. You should know me. Yu Hong hesitated for a while. That boss, I'll tell you? Go ahead. Don't worry and speak boldly. Qin Guang looked as if he was a magnanimous person who wouldn't hold a grudge against a lowly person. After that, he turned on the hands-free mode and gave a hand gesture to Lu Xiaoyang before making a reassuring expression. His body language and expression were basically saying, We've been working together for a long time. As long as it's not an unforgivable mistake in principle, I won't argue with you. Actually, this is not our problem. Alright, we also have some problems. But it's more of your problem, boss. Yu Hong spouted a whole bunch of strange words. Qin Guang felt that there was a hidden meaning in Yu Hong's words. Can you stop with the tongue twister? Old Yu, why are you getting more and more dishonest? Qin Guang pretended to be angry. Yu Hong finally said helplessly. There's a problem with the publishing and distribution of World School Performing Arts. Qin Guang was unhappy. What's wrong? We are robbing people in North America and asking for a high price. Are the printing factories in China doing the same? Yu Hong, no. This is not the case. It's another situation. Boss, the 10 million sets that you specifically mentioned before have all been printed, but the sales after the launch are a little awkward. How is that possible? Qin Guang was confused. He thought to himself that it was impossible. He was doing well in the foreigner's territory and he was even out of stock. Why did his own people not buy it? What kind of world is this? Why are those evil trolls targeting me? Is there a limit to your worship of foreigners? As a fellow Chinese, I have succeeded. Why can't you see me doing well? The old man's plan to win the Best Actor award was based in China. How could this be? People's hearts are not what they used to be. It's sad and lamentable. Mr. Lu Sun once said, Forget it. I won't quote the classics. Anyway, I've been tricked by my own people this time. Qin Guang was heartbroken. What is this? Old Yu, you don't know how popular World School Performing Arts is in North America. I really didn't expect that my family in China is dragging me down. Boss, it's not easy to sell the full English version in China. After all, it's difficult for ordinary readers to read it. Qin Guang's expression suddenly froze. Then he grabbed the phone and turned to look at Lu Xiaoyang. Buttface, is the full English version printed in China? Lu Xiaoyang nodded with a bitter face. That's right. Boss, you only wrote the English version. We were in a hurry to print it. You didn't even have time to translate it. We didn't have enough time to find someone else to translate it. We wanted to print a few copies first to test the waters, but you insisted that we print 10 million copies. The cost of printing in China is lower, but the total cost of 10 million copies is more than 200 million renminbi. Yu Hong was also saying something similar on the phone, but it was more practical. Well, boss, these printing houses only took part of the deposit from us because of the reputation of the Qingguang Group and the impressive box office of Women. But now all the books have been printed, and they are all piled up in the warehouse of our cooperative publishing house. The problem now is that on one hand, the publishing house wants us to take all the books away as soon as possible. On the other hand, the printing house also needs to pay the balance as soon as possible. But the booksellers all over the country are asking us to return the books. Many of our previous orders have been cancelled. The full English version is really not selling. So, Qingguang knew that things were not going well. This was King embarrassing. After all this time, it was not that his family had abandoned him. It was just that he had been hot-headed and arrogant. He did not pay enough attention to the details and forgot the most important thing. He took it for granted that he had created the magnificent feat of selling 10 million full English versions of academic monographs in China. As for why Yu Hong and Lu Xiaoyang did not dissuade him back then, Qingguang could understand. When he decided to come to the United States to cause trouble, Qingguang brainwashed others in all kinds of ways. He boasted about himself to be unparalleled in the world. That was not all. He was extremely tough and would do what he said. He did not accept any objections at all. In ancient times he was even more stubborn than Xiangyu the Conqueror. Furthermore, the four great warriors had brainwashed him and had inexplicably strong confidence in him. So, even if they felt that it was nonsense, they still believed in Qingguang's nonsense. They thought that even if it was an English version, it might really be able to sell in China. So far, the boss had never made a wrong decision. Because of this, the 10 million copies of the performing arts monograph were published in China in the shortest time possible. It was released on a large scale in the market. Unfortunately, it turned out that selling combs to bald men, tampons to men, and Quan Zhilong's autographed posters to Wu Jing was not reliable at all. A few days had passed, and the total sales had not even exceeded 10,000 copies. It was impossible to sell them. So, the boss was not always right. It was normal to fall into a ditch once in a while. Just now, Yu Hong didn't mean to hide it from Qingguang. Although the senior managers of the companies were partly responsible, Qingguang was the one who made the biggest mistake. Yu Hong was worried about Qingguang's reputation. He had planned to find another way to tell Qingguang the bad news in a more artistic way. But now that his ears were so good that he could hear it from the side, there was nothing he could do. Seeing that Qingguang was silent, Yu Hong thought he was blaming himself. So he comforted him, "Alas, boss, we are responsible for this. We didn't fulfill our duties and caused a great loss to the company." Seeing Qingguang's serious face, Buttface also took the blame. "Boss, don't worry. We will find a way to overcome this difficulty together." Qingguang forced himself to stay calm and waved his hand. "This is not a difficulty at all. It's just 200 million yuan. Our movie makes so much money. It's just a drop in the bucket." "Boss, it's 260 million yuan. On the phone, Yu Hong interrupted at an inopportune time. Qingguang's hands trembled slightly. He was so sad that he couldn't put it into words. Looks like this old man's illustrious reputation is going to be ruined in a day. What a scam. If it was another boss, he would have thrown the blame on the table immediately. Why didn't you remind me earlier? However, Qingguang was not used to shirking his responsibility. Before he came to the United States, he had been furious because his colleagues always undermined him. When he decided to print 10 million sets, Fang Tianyu and Lu Xiaoyang also questioned him. He was so obsessed with the pleasure of acting tough that he lost his mind. He didn't give them any room to object. However, it was useless to regret now. His loss was even more painful than buying the Tongshan industrial plant for 170 million yuan. This was the disadvantage of getting richer and richer. When he was poor, he made a stupid mistake and was cheated online. The loss was only about 1,000 yuan. Now he was so rich that his loss was as high as 260 million yuan because of his carelessness. Although he was making money on the movie side, it was sad to lose money on the other side. He forced himself to stay awake. "Aha, this is a small matter. Don't worry about the details." I let go of the microphone and yawned, but my mind was spinning rapidly as I tried to think of a way to escape. Faced with this situation, how should I turn the tide? He could admit that he lost money, but he couldn't admit that he lost money. This would stain his glorious image in the eyes of his employees. He must think of a way to turn the tide as soon as possible. Suddenly, his mind seemed to be enlightened. Ding dong. I got it. The Qin Guang in Lu Xiaoyang's eyes suddenly stopped frowning. Not only that, the corners of his eyes began to bend slightly, and his mouth began to smile. What kind of smile is this? Qin Guang's expression reminded Lu Xiaoyang of the Romance of the Three Kingdoms that he had read many years ago. In the story, Zhuge Liang, who was thousands of miles away, won the battle. The Prime Minister didn't even hide the truth from his own people when he tricked them with his amazing plan. When everything was settled, Prime Minister Zhuge, who even tricked his own people, would show an expression that said, "Haha, you idiots. You didn't expect this, did you? Let the old man tell you everything in detail." That's right. Don't panic. Don't panic. Don't panic at all. Qin Guang finally spoke once more. His voice was filled with vigor. He waved his hand generously. Lao you buttface, you are all not. Yes, panic. Everything is under control. To tell you the truth, this old man, oh no, this is my preparation for a rainy day. This is exactly what I want. Aha, you were shocked just now, right? Did I do a good job? Lu Xiaoyang and Yu Hong, who was on the other side of the phone, were at a loss. They didn't understand what Qin Guang, their boss, was going to do this time. Qin Guang wiped the sweat off his forehead. He felt that it was even more tiring than acting as Romeo to trick Buttface into the role. As expected, art comes from life and life is better than art. Lu Xiaoyang and Yu Hong said almost at the same time, "Boss, what's going on?" Qin Guang said with an enigmatic smile, "To be honest, I have expected all this. I plan to print 10 million copies of the English version in China. Buttface, have you forgotten? We have run out of stock in North America. We haven't even started to publish it in Europe. Now the printing houses in North America are taking advantage of us, right? I have planned to transport 10 million copies from China to North America and sell them in North America." When Qin Guang spoke, his face was brimming with confidence and pride. He was waiting for Lu Xiaoyang to change his expression to that of worship. Lu Xiaoyang clasped his hands together and said, "Boss, you can predict the future. Boss, you can win 1,000 miles away." Unexpectedly, Lu Xiaoyang scratched his head. "Well, 10,000 tons of books can only be shipped by sea. We can charter a fast ship, which can reach Los Angeles in about 3 weeks. But there is a problem." Qin Guang's heart missed a beat. What's the problem? Although it is a full English edition, it is still a domestic publication. It is fine if only 1 or 2 copies are shipped over in small quantities, but there are 10 million copies. The North American Publishing Office will not approve it, and the U.S. Department of Commerce will not approve it either. We are suspected of dumping. Yu Hong was also saying the same thing on the phone. Qin Guang was cursing in his heart, but he couldn't show it. He was still very calm. "Comrade Lu, I have a way to solve your problem. It is also within my consideration. Where there is a will, there is a way. Haha, you go ahead with your work. I will prepare the teaching materials for tomorrow's lecture." After saying that, Qin Guang drove Lu Xiaoyang away. When Lu Xiaoyang left, he sat down on the chair and rubbed his hands. "I can't admit this loss. I have to find a way. 260 million. In other words, that was only the cost. If these books were sold to the US, they would be worth 600 million US dollars. That was huge profits. Qin Guang wouldn't have thought of this if he hadn't made that mistake. But now he had to use his brain. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.